the Awesemo MLB Deeper Dive, and a pretty interesting day of baseball today. I'm still not totally sure who's on what team. It's a lot to wrap our minds around. There were so many trades today. I don't even know what the total count was for trades. Did you see anybody write anywhere, Adam, like how many trades there were in total? Because it seemed like the most I've ever seen from any trade deadline ever.
Yeah, I don't know what the number was, but it's definitely the craziest deadline I can remember, both in terms of just volume and in terms of the quality of players traded. Like normally when you're coming up on trade deadlines, it's always, XYZ star player could be moved, and then it doesn't happen. And then this time it was just like, yeah, no, they're all going to be moved. So just the pretty crazy trade deadline definitely didn't disappoint.
Yeah, there was, I think, some clear winners, some clear losers. I think everybody's going to say that probably the Dodgers were the biggest winner of the trade deadline. Biggest loser to me is the Colorado Rockies, just because they didn't do anything and they're not competing. They're not rebuilding. They just exist as a below average team. Anything else other than that were, major takeaways from like a grand scheme of things for you?
With you on the Rockies, I kind of thought the Twins would do more and get more prospects into their system. They moved Barrios, but they kept Pineda, they kept Buxton, they kept other guys that I thought maybe would go. The Phillies trade, Spencer Howard struggled in the majors, but I thought they overpaid for Kyle Gibson. I don't expect Gibson to be very good the rest of the year. So that one kind of stood out to me. But I'm with you on the Rockies. No idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
And also, I guess the Padres kind of just lose by default because the Dodgers got better. The Giants added Chris Bryant, and the Padres missed on Barrios and they missed on Scherzer.
Yeah, that and Blake Snell has been such a disappointment. Like that was supposed to be their big, that and Yu Darvish is the big pitching acquisitions this year. And they just haven't really gotten anything from Blake Snell. I think ultimately he's probably going to have to move to the bullpen in the playoffs, and that could be a role that he finds himself some more success in. But other than that, some comments we have here from the YouTube chat. How about them Cardinals getting J Happ and John Lester? Yeah, that was weird. Just trying to acquire a decent rotation from 10 years ago. And Larry C also agreeing with us. The Rockies are dumb, getting nothing for Story, but a draft pick. Yeah, he's likely going to be gone in the offseason. Not the only winners that we had along the trade deadline, because we also had yesterday one of the better baseball nights we've seen here in a while. So Tyler, cue up the Hall of Fame segment, because we had a bunch of big winners yesterday. The main reason was because of the Toronto Blue Jays. I was pretty high on Toronto. I know, Adam, you were high on the Toronto Blue Jays. That was a team that ended up being very key for stacks. The only thing that, if I'm going to nitpick a little bit, is, by the way, is the Hall of Fame thing playing on the screen right now? Yeah. Okay. Well, I can't tell who's on the screen right now, but I know that Neil Orfeld, he had a big win yesterday. Adam, you weren't far behind him in that tournament. And once again, Blue Jay stacks. I wish that we would have gotten a little bit more out of them when Kevin Plawecki was pitching in the ninth inning, but whatever. It was a good night. Can't really complain too much. They were key to stacks. We liked them a whole bunch. They were also low owned. Some other big winners that we have here. Sean Smith, he had a first place finish. Gingerbread, he came in first place. The font's a little bit too small, so I can't see exactly where Tyler is right now. But most importantly, if you guys would like to be a member of the Awesemo Hall of Fame, first thing you need to do is download the Awesemo profile avatar pick. Set that as your avatar pick on FanDuel and DraftKings. If you happen to come in top 3 in a GPP, tweet your wins at Awesemo Hall of Fame, and then you could win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And that's how you get access to all the different tools that we'll be talking about on the show and we bring up during the course of our analysis, which was a big reason that I was on the Toronto Blue Jays last night. If I remember correctly, they ended up finishing with like a 9% positive leverage stack. It was one of the best leverage scores we've seen in quite some time. They rated it as a really good stack for us. It was good to see that they didn't end up with that much ownership. And if you guys are not in the Awesemo Hall of Fame, but you would like to try out Awesemo Plus, you could go sign up for an Awesemo Plus Platinum package for $24.99. Or if you would like to get 25% off when you're new signing up, use the promo code MLB Deeper Dive. That's all one word, all capital letters, and you get access to all of the Awesemo Plus tools. All right, let's dive into this slate now, Adam. And first game, I think we could just kind of start here as a write-off because it is the Cubs against the Nationals. It was supposed to be Trevor Williams on the mound for the Cubs. It was supposed to be John Lester on the mound for the Nationals. Both of them have been traded, so we don't have starting pitchers yet for either of these teams. But the good thing is we have starting pitchers for everybody else today. So before we move on, have you seen anybody announce as a starting pitcher in the last few minutes?
No, I haven't seen starting pitchers here. We do know, of course, that the Cubs lineup will be watered down too, since they no longer have Rizzo, Baez, or Bryant. And the Nats obviously don't have Turner. But no, I haven't seen starting pitching for either team.
Yeah, so I thought this was a good one just to start with, get out of the way. Because we all know who the pitchers are, the offense, even that's a little bit in flux. Both these teams traded away everybody at the deadline. I mean, the Cubs got rid of Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, Javi Baez. The Nationals traded away Trey Turner. They traded away Kyle Schwarber, although he was on the injured list. But that aside, it's going to be bad pitching. It's going to be bad offenses. Who knows what to make of that?
They also traded Josh Harrison and Yan Gomes.
Yeah, it's basically these teams are missing half the pitchers, half the starting lineup. So we'll see what the lineups and the pitching brings and whatnot. And then we'll have to make decisions later on the day about that. Also, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. MLB Live Before Lock is coming up next. They'll have a better idea of who some of these starting pitchers are. But now the first game that we could actually break down here, the Philadelphia Phillies in Pittsburgh to take on the Pirates here. Vince Velasquez on the mound for the Phillies going up against Will Crowe. So starting with the pitchers here, what do you make of Vince Velasquez? Because he's a guy that's kind of been a high variance pitcher. There's been times where he's had a little bit of upside, but I generally find it hard to get to him. Although on this slate, he is going up against the Pirates. Does that make him a viable SP2 for you at all on DK?
I still think it's going to be pretty difficult to get to him. The matchup's good. It's a positive park shift. But the thing that's going to hold me back is there's just so many pitching options on this slate that, for one, even though Velasquez isn't getting basically any ownership at all, it's not that difficult to find the pitchers that are relatively low owned that look better than Velasquez. And there's a couple of guys in his price range too that I think just look a lot better. His strikeout percentage is down a bit this year. It's only at about 22.5%. He's still giving up a ton of power, which again isn't as concerning when he's pitching in Pittsburgh and facing these Pirates bats. But I still just have other pitchers in his price range that I would much rather get to.
All right. And here we have a question here from Eric Johnson who's saying, talk me off of Will Crowe. I will not have too much difficulty. I hope I don't have that much difficulty talking off of Will Crowe. Will Crowe this year has a 5.89 ERA. He has a 5.34 expected ERA. He has a 21.1% strikeout rate. So we have a guy who doesn't strike hitters out. He gives up a whole bunch of runs. He doesn't even generally work all that deep into games. He's made 15 appearances this year and pitched a total of 65 innings. I don't know how else I would talk you out of him other than to say that he's no good. Even for DFS pricing, he should be cheaper on DraftKings. Like the 5,300 price tag, I kind of think is inaccurate. I think he should be in the 4K range. So Will Crowe, would you like to aid me in talking Eric Johnson off of him?
I don't mind him if you're playing 150 lineups, just because of how cheap he is. I think that it's a watered down Phillies lineup as well. You don't have Hoskins, you don't have Segura. But outside of that, like there's nothing good for me to say about Crowe other than he's $5,300 and he's fully stretched out. He's thrown 90 plus pitches in 3 of his last 4 starts. So, and 88 and 89 in the other 2. So his last 5 starts, he's gone 89, 95, 97, 88, 90. Fully stretched out at 5,300. If you're playing 150 lineups, I can see getting a little bit, but definitely not anybody I'm confident in. Not even my favorite pitcher in the 5K range. So, outside of the price tag, I don't really have anything.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll add to it is I do like the Phillies as a stack. If you do look at our top stacks tool, we have the Phillies with the 3rd best odds of being the high-scoring team on the slate. They are also going a little bit under-owned. The price tags are a little bit of an issue because this team is a little bit pricey. But all things considered, I don't mind paying up for the Phillies. They do look to going under-owned. And like I said, 3rd best odds of us to be the top stack of the day. So I like getting the Phillies against Will Crowe for a lot of the same reasons I just said I didn't like Will Crowe. I don't think he's any good.
Yeah, I'm with you. He's particularly struggled with right-handed power this year. 264 expected ISO to righties, 129 to lefties. He's only struck out 19% of right-handed hitters. Like I said, this is a bit of a watered-down lineup. I'd like the Phillies a lot more if you had Segura and Hoskins. But Real Muto is still going to look like a very good catcher option leading off. Bryce Harper still always looks good. Brad Miller's got power. McCutchen looks fine. They are priced up a bit, though, too. So they do look like they're going a little bit under-owned. But again, I do just kind of wish that their lineup was better tonight and that they were a little bit cheaper.
So in terms of pitching, just because I think this is, an important point to hit on before we go any further, how important is the pricing for the offenses for you today? Because it does seem like there are a lot of high-end pitchers, and there aren't really that many cheap pitchers I've really liked today. So maybe this is a slate where I'm going to have to prioritize cheaper offenses more than usual. Is that something that's weighing on you at all as you're looking at this slate?
There's quite a few mid-range pitchers that I like, so I think I'll be able to get to bats. What does stand out, though, is that it just seems like pricing in general is tighter on hitters today. We've had so many slates recently where it's, this hitter is priced $1,000 less than he should be. We don't have too much of that today, but I think there is a very high upside mid-range of SP2s. So in tournaments, you can either just go with 2 of those guys and hope that Burns and Lynn don't kill you at the top, or you can pair them with Burns or Lynn and still get some decent bats. So I expect in tournaments to still be able to get to some payout bats. But I also just don't really want to pay for this Philly offense quite as much as I want to pay for some others.
Yeah, and I mean that's all well and good. We do have them, like I said, with really good top stack odds, but they are also super expensive. So that is something that can make it a little bit of a difficulty to get to them. We do have some really strong high end starting pitchers. Next game that we have here on the slate is going to be Daniel Lynch on the mound for the Royals in Toronto to take on Ross Stripling. So starting with Daniel Lynch, he has had negative success this year. He has pitched, it's only 16 innings, but in those 16 innings, 7.88 ERA, 7.88 expected ERA. So 7.78, but either way, very identical numbers. If you look at his minor league numbers this year, they've also been no good. He's a 5.84 ERA and a 4.59 FIP in AAA. So now he's getting another shot at the big leagues. I do not expect this to go well. They're also going up against the Blue Jays, a team that was a hero for us yesterday. I like getting back to the Blue Jays again. If I'm getting contrarian to pay up with a team, the Blue Jays aren't necessarily contrarian, but once again, in our top stack odds, they are going under-owned. So for the second consecutive day, and for what feels like the 8th time in the last 10 days, I'm going to be overweight to the field on the Blue Jays in a fairly significant way.
Yeah, I like the Blue Jays here just because of all the right-handed power that they have. I think I'm a little more concerned about the matchup with Lynch than you are, just because he's one of the top prospects in baseball. He's a top 100 prospect. He really, really struggled in his first stint after being called up this year. But then Kansas City sent him back to the minors. And in the first start he made, granted it was against Detroit, he went 8 innings, struck out 4, got 15 ground balls in that game. So maybe fix some stuff. I still think Toronto has the advantage here. I still think they're being underowned. But I do think there's a chance that we see a better version of Daniel Lynch than we saw earlier in the year.
Yeah, I mean, there's nowhere to go but up, right? It's not going to be a worse version of him. I don't even know what a worse version would look like. You have to come out and just give up, like 7 runs in 4 innings every start the rest of the way. So yeah, but I think that is something to consider. He does have a pretty good prospect outlook. If you look at his FanGraphs ranking coming into the season, 3rd overall ranked prospect in the Royals organization, 78th overall throughout all of baseball. But ultimately, I just kind of have to look at some of these results and his ZiPS projections for the rest of the year, because ZiPS only has him projected for a 5.16 ERA in his rest of his starts this year. So that's a little bit of a concern. That, and just this Blue Jays offense is so good. And whenever we see them with positive leverage, it's a spot I generally want to get to. On the other side here, it's going to be Ross Stripling on the mound. For me right now, I don't really have interest in Ross Stripling, but I also don't really want to stack against him with the Royals. I think there's better spots to target both from pitching and offense. How do you feel any differently about that?
No, that's pretty much where I'm at too. There's always questions with Stripling about exactly how deep he's going to go into the game. 79 pitches last time out. I'm throwing away the start before that because he just pitched awful. He didn't get out of the first inning. Before that, though, 73 pitches, 97 pitches, 95 pitches. If he's pitching well, maybe you see him get to 90, but I think there's enough alternatives priced around him that I feel better about. I do think that Jorge Soler being traded from Kansas City is beneficial for Stripling because he has had some issues with right-handed power this year, and Soler is one of the guys that obviously stands out for Kansas City in that regard. So him no longer being on the team helps, but smaller slate, I think I'd have some interest in Stripling. On this slate, I'm less interested just because of alternatives that I like.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Also, it's a 15-game slate, and it's hard to, if you like everybody, where it's hard to do that. If you cast the net too thin, then it's just like, I have 2% exposure, like every single offense on the slate. So on 5-6 game slates, I don't really mind trying to allocate my ownership, or I'm a little bit everywhere. But on a slate this large, there has to be spots I cut off, and the Royals would be one of the ones I look at. Not because I think they're a bad offense, or not I think they're a good offense. I think they're kind of middle of the road. It's a mediocre matchup, but just better spots to target. Next game here is going to be Sonny Gray on the mound for the Reds against Carlos Carrasco and the Mets. Carlos Carrasco making his Mets debut. He only pitched 3 starts in the minor leagues leading up to this, and it was a total of 6 2/3 innings. So it's kind of hard to know what to expect from him. Other than that, I don't think he's going to work very deep into the game. Beyond that, I do have concerns about how effective he's going to be. He's 34 years old at this point. We know he's dealt with all kinds of health issues, both in terms of elbow issues, just arm issues in general. And then also he did have cancer at one point. And now you just weigh in his age and all this, him coming back from another injury. I don't know. Like, what are you making of Carlos Carrasco here? I think that there's some merit to stacking against him just because there's just so much stuff mounting against him at this point.
Yeah, I made that case on the show with Josh this morning. If you just plug into a projection system Carlos Carrasco and you throw in the Reds, they're not going to look very good. They only have a 3.7 implied run total. I just think that like the margin for error here is so wide because we have no idea what Carlos Carrasco we're getting. He's been out for so long. Even if you look at the 3 minor league starts he made, in one of them, he went 2 innings, allowed no earned runs, struck out 2. In his most recent, he went 3 innings, allowed no earned runs, struck out 6. If he comes out and does something like that today, you're like, yeah, okay, cool. That's Carlos Carrasco. In the one in between, he went 1 2/3, gave up 5 earned runs, including 3 homers. It's just, we have no idea what this version of Carlos Carrasco looks like. From a fan standpoint, hopefully he's good, but Cincinnati probably just has a higher ceiling than you would typically expect in this spot against Carlos Carrasco. They're not going to get any ownership. So I do have some interest in them, especially in the larger field tournaments, just because we really could just get a Carlos Carrasco that, you look back on the start and just go, oh, wow, this guy is not what the Mets thought they were getting.
Yeah, and who knows? It's still a thing where there's so, and also, he was kind of a throw into the trade. The trade was really for Francisco Lindor, right, and they were just eating Carlos Carrasco's contract as part of it. I think the Mets also look at it as, hey, they have no clue what they're getting from Carrasco. He is a fairly team-friendly deal. It was a 4-year contract for $47 million, given the quality of pitcher he was. I think that's pretty favorable, but there's such a wide range of outcomes. Like you said, if Carlos Carrasco finishes the year as a top of the rotation starting pitcher, I wouldn't be surprised. If he's mediocre, I wouldn't be surprised. If he sucks, I wouldn't be surprised. The thing I'm going to be paying attention to most here is going to be his velocity in the early going, and as a potential live betting opportunity. If Carlos Carrasco comes out in the first inning and his first few pitches, he's throwing like 89 miles per hour or something that's just way far off from what we used to see him, then I'd be looking to potentially place a live bet on the Reds because, like I said, I think there's a whole wide range of outcomes here, and Carrasco might be watched, who's to say. So with that in mind, I think it makes sense to make stacks of a contrarian Reds team. Nobody's doing it, and we have no clue what to expect from Carrasco. So I think that's a sensible option. On the other side, Sonny Gray going up against the Mets. What do you make of this matchup? Because I do think Sonny Gray is a quality starting pitcher. He's been a little bit inconsistent this year, but there's just a lot of other guys that I'd rather pay up for, most namely Corbin Burnes and Lance Lynn.
Yeah, I don't love the matchup for Gray, but it's also not the worst matchup in the world. Where I see value in Sonny Gray is I think that he's a pretty strong pivot in tournaments where right now we have Jameson Taillon, who we'll talk about later, pulling 21% ownership at $8,700. Sonny Gray is getting 11% at $9,200. I don't think the range of outcomes is really any different for those guys. We actually have Sonny Gray with a slightly higher top 2 pitcher percentage. So that's one spot where I do think using Gray as a lower owned pivot makes some sense, especially if you have a more popular lineup, because Gray does have one of the highest strikeout percentages on the slate. He's 4th behind Corbin Burnes, Touki Toussaint, and Kevin Gausman. And of course, Toussaint, we're only talking about 2 starts there. So 28.8% strikeout percentage for Gray is very, very good. He's also posted a really high strikeout percentage against left-handed hitters, in particular this year at 32.4%. And that's noteworthy because we don't have a Mets lineup yet, but there's a good chance that you're going to have a very left-handed heavy lineup with Nimmo, McNeil, Smith, Conforto, VR hitting from the left side. So that could play to Gray's strengths as well. I think he's a good pitcher. He's low owned, so I like that. But there are just so many options on this slate. And like you said, it's not that difficult probably to get from Gray up to Lynn or Burnes. And then you also can drop from Gray down to some of these sub 8K guys that at least I'm going to like, you may like as well, and still get upside that way. So I don't know that in practice I'll actually have a lot of exposure to Gray, but I do think that he is a quality option at 11% ownership.
Yeah, I think that if you're building 150 lineups, it just kind of makes sense to be somewhere around the field with him, which once again, that still provides him some leverage off of other pitchers. But still, the priority for me overall for this slate, it's going to be paying up for Corbin Burnes and Lance Lynn. There aren't that many pitchers that I think we could still reliably say we're super confident in terms of their ability to consistently generate good starts. Corbin Burnes and Lance Lynn are 2 of those guys for me. So that's going to be my priority here. Also, I mean, the price difference, it matters a little bit. $1,000 cheaper than Corbin Burnes, $1,100 cheaper than Lance Lynn on DK. But once again, that's not something that's massively problematic in terms of saving the $1,000 because it's a 15-game slate. It's not hard to find value. So that's something else on slates of this size. I'm more apt to pay up for pitching just because when everything kind of sells, especially not only the 15-game slate, but there's going to be so many odd players in good lineup spots and good matchups today, just because like the Cubs and Nationals lineups today. I don't know who's going to be out there, but they're going to be cheap and they're going to be in a good matchup. So it's going to be easy enough to find value that I think paying up for pitching is not going to be all that difficult of a task for me. So Sonny Gray is somebody who, once again, whatever, fine, appropriately owned. I think I'd rather roster him than some of the other over-owned pitchers in this price range. But Lance Lynn and Corbin Burnes, that's going to be a priority for me at pitching. Next game we have here, Matt Harvey on the mound against Detroit. So the Detroit Tigers, who just continually end up being chalk at this time of the year, although against Matt Harvey, it's a little bit more understandable in some other spots that we've seen where the Tigers have been chalk lately. But what are you doing with Detroit as, once again, a very popular stack? They are the fourth most rostered offense on the slate today. But Matt Harvey, who's basically been a train wreck. So what do you do with Detroit here in large field tournaments?
As it stands right now, I probably won't get to a whole lot of Detroit. I just typically don't when they're popular because they're individually, they're okay. Like they have some quality hitters like Baду, Scope, Grossman, Eric Haas, but especially on a slate this big, you can just find better hitters or at least lower owned hitters. Harvey hasn't been good this year, but I also don't think he's been quite as bad as people give him credit for. He's got a 4.77 xFIP, which certainly isn't good, but I kind of just feel like the narrative with Harvey, because he used to be so good, is that now he's like this 6+ ERA or xFIP guy that is just absolutely awful. He's only struck out 16% of hitters. He's allowed 1.2 home runs per 9. By no means is he a good pitcher, but he's at least good enough where it wouldn't be the most shocking thing if he just kind of gets through this start and does okay, like he has in his last couple. So I think it's a good spot for the Tigers. If they were lower owned, I would certainly like them. But as it is right now, I'm okay just going to some other teams and hoping that Detroit doesn't break the slate open.
Yeah, and that's been the case with Detroit a lot. And listen, they totally broke a slate open 2 days ago where we had them score, what was that final score of the game? 17-14 against the Twins. Yes, that slate you needed to have them. But then even like last night, we had, so like Malwikar said in the chat that he wished he would have played Detroit the past 2 games. I don't think you had to play them yesterday at all. Like, we all did fine here rostering the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays had a third of the ownership. Like, I didn't mind that at all. And that's still the case going to be today, is we just have this team with, and by the way, I get the matchup against Matt Harvey is incredible. Matt Harvey's not capable of getting out big league hitters anymore, but I still don't think that means the Tigers have a 10% chance to be the top scoring team on a slate this large. So there's other teams for less ownership I'd rather get to. We have Detroit Tigers with a 4.6% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate today, which, listen, I mean, that's pretty solid for a slate with this many teams, but it just doesn't warrant the kind of ownership they're getting. We still have the Toronto Blue Jays picking up comparable ownership with about 3x the odds of being a top scoring team. So there's other spots I'd rather get to than the Tigers. Kind of the same boat I've been in. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll say, I think yesterday, what happened yesterday is kind of like is actually sort of the perfect explanation of why you don't need to go to a really popular Detroit team in large field tournaments, because let's say they score 6 runs, right? There's a pretty good chance that they end up being some of the best value plays on the slate. But because of how baseball scoring is, like hitters can score so many points that being the best point per dollar or being good point per dollar plays isn't necessarily that useful. Like the Tigers didn't hurt you yesterday in terms of what they did for your salary, but for the most part, you needed Toronto and the Brewers to come in at the top of tournaments. I know that's what I had in tournaments that I won and tournaments that I came close to winning, because the Brewers just scored so many points, and so did the Blue Jays, that nobody cares that you got 15 points at 3K from some Tigers. That just wasn't enough. So it's still, you on a slate this big, the Tigers can go score 6 or 7 runs. They're probably not going to be that useful in terms of getting you to first place in a tournament, because there's most likely going to be a few teams that scored 8+ runs here because there's so many teams playing. That's just kind of how it works. And then you factor in that so many people are playing the Tigers, and those 6 to 7 runs become even less likely to be what separates you from the field. So I think it's just an easier path to winning to, in most lineups, not be on Detroit, go to these other lower owned teams, hope that Matt Harvey somehow has a good start. Detroit scores like 3 runs and you just are walking past 10% of the field.
Yeah, or we get something that happens like yesterday. Maybe they do pretty well, but I'm going to like the Toronto Blue Jays again. And maybe the Toronto Blue Jays outscore the Tigers by a bunch of runs like they did yesterday. And like you said, maybe the Tigers have a good offensive game, but there's just other teams we like more in better spots that have even better offensive games. And that's kind of where I'm standing today. I'm not going to argue this is a bad spot for the Tigers against Matt Harvey. It clearly isn't. But there's just other spots I would rather get to, especially when weighing in this ownership. However, one guy on the Tigers I do like quite a bit today is going to be their starting pitcher, Tariq Skubal, who doesn't have the best underlying numbers this year. He has a 4.42 ERA, but a 5.38 expected ERA. What interests me about him, 26.3% K rate, so he's capable of striking guys out. It's a favorable matchup against the Baltimore Orioles, and there isn't all that much ownership going to Skubal today. If you look at his price on DK, it's pretty favorable. It's 7,500. Actually, he's picking up a little bit of ownership now. It's 17%. It's a little lower earlier, but either way, as far as pitchers go in the 7K range, I do like Skubal quite a bit. I think this is a good spot to target him for strikeout upside.
Yeah, so do I. I actually like both sides here. Scooble's been good this year. Strikeout numbers are good. Walk rate is acceptable. Overall, so far, he's struck out. Why can't I find his name? There it is. He struck out 26.9% of hitters, 8.7% walk percentage. The only real issue he's had is he has allowed 2 home runs per 9. Mostly having issues with right-handed power, as you would expect. The strikeout rate against righties is still good at 26%, but he has allowed a 245 expected ISO, 255 actual ISO. That's a little bit concerning when you look at the Orioles because they probably will have 8 right-handed hitters in this lineup. They don't have the most power, but guys like Hayes, Mancini, Mountcastle do have power. The only lefty, Cedric Mullins, or the only expected lefty is Mullins, who's a good hitter overall. So it is kind of a scary spot for him, but at his price tag, I just think there's too much upside for his salary. But that being said, I do also like getting to that other side because Scooball is getting around 20% ownership. And I think the Orioles do have enough right-handed power that they could potentially do some damage.
And are there any individual hitters in that Orioles lineup you like? We don't really have to worry about ownership basically whenever we talk about the Orioles. So it could generally just be, and also pricing usually isn't a concern either. But anybody in particular you like here?
I really like the salary on Hayes, but I think if you're like ignoring pricing and ignoring ownership and everything, Mancini's the guy that really stands out. Since the start of the 2019 season, obviously he didn't play last year. Mancini has a 284 expected ISO, 278 actual ISO against left-handed pitching. So he's the one that really stands out. Hayes has power from the right side. Mountcastle has power from the right side. And, then you can just kind of round it out with some other cheap guys if you're full stacking. But 2, 3, 4, Hayes, Mancini, Mountcastle is, I think, the key part here.
But I also like that we're at a point in the season now. And by the way, these are totally reasonable questions, but we're nicking these. I was like, is Chris Bryant playing for the Yankees today? He ended up getting traded to the Giants. But something we did see happen is, by the way, Bob Nightingale, who's maybe the worst follow on MLB Twitter, just always gets everything wrong. There was a fake Jeff Passan account that he thought that had said that Chris Bryant got traded to the Yankees, and Bob Nightingale picked that up and then reported that Chris Bryant got traded to the Yankees, which was probably my favorite moment of the MLB trade deadline. There's never a point where Bob Nightingale cannot mess up some sort of news day. So that was a slam dunk to happen, but the way it came about was particularly entertaining.
Yeah, it was really good. And then Jeff Passan had some fun with it too.
Yeah, and also it was a guy, Jeff Passan, who is, and this is Jeff Passan brought up. There was somebody who spelled Jeff with like 4 F's, and people were still like, "Oh, look, it's Jeff Passan with the
and misspelled his last name."
Yeah, but still,
I'm still waiting for the Bob Nightingale tweets about Manny Machado to be traded for Michael Kopech to come true, and the Orioles to actually get a prospect for Machado.
There was a Reddit thread that just tracked all the things that Bob Nightingale's gotten wrong. And it is just a hilarious amount because there's a baseball Reddit thread where they're just like, we have to start banning Bob Nightingale because too much of his bad reporting. It's like, even Reddit looks at Bob Nightingale like, this guy, this is nonsense. This stuff this guy's saying.
They draw the line at Bob Nightingale.
Yeah, that's conspiracy theory is all good. But Bob Nightingale's like, there's nobody thinks that guy has any credibility. The next game we have here to talk about, and this is going to be an important one, the New York Yankees against Miami Marlins, because Jameson Taillon is going to be on the mound from New York. He's picking up quite a bit of ownership today. And the Marlins lineup, it is going to be bad going forward for the rest of the season. They're actually really rich with pitching right now, the Marlins, but the offense is going to be an issue. So what do we make of Jameson Taillon, who, to refresh ownership, last I looked, he was a little over 20% owned on DK. Let's see if that's still the case. I also, I expect we're going to be getting a lot of ownership updates and a lot of different projection updates leading up to lock, just because this is totally unforeseen and not something we've seen before for baseball, even close to this, where there's this many players trade or changing teams. So all kinds of expected rotations, lineups, and all that are going to change. But as of now, Taillon's projected for over 20% ownership on DK. Over on FanDuel, he's projected for 12% ownership. That also makes him one of the most popular pitchers there. So what are you going to do with Taillon, who's clearly in a great spot, but is picking up a lot of ownership for a guy who hasn't had all that much success this year?
Yeah, my assumption is I get around the field or maybe even a little bit lower in tournaments. I get why he's getting the ownership. I think it's a very good matchup against Miami. It's going to be a weak offense, like you said. They don't have Starling Marte. They traded Adam Duvall today. So it was already a bad offense, and it's just going to get worse. Then you factor in that this game's in Miami, which is a favorable place to pitch, and the matchup just gets even better. My kind of counter argument to Taillon is that I think he's priced for the matchup. Jameson Taillon has not been an $8,700 pitcher this year or anywhere close to it. He's coming in with a 23% strikeout percentage, 4.74 xFIP, 1.5 home runs per 9. if you just take those numbers, you would never, and then tell me that the guy's $8,700, you would never say, oh yeah, that seems about right. So I think he's pretty clearly priced for this matchup, and people are still going to it because the matchup is good. So I think that's fine. It's just, I don't think he's underpriced here. I think everything looks good, and he's still pulling 21% ownership. So that kind of brings me back to what I was saying about Sonny Gray, where I think Sonny Gray is appropriately priced. They're both appropriately priced, but you're getting almost double the ownership going to Tyon. If I'm going to that range, I would just rather, I think, be going to Gray at the lower ownership, because I think they project similarly. I think they have basically the same range of outcomes. And ideally, I think I'm going to just be out, like not in that price range. I'm going to be going up to Burns and Lynn. I'm going to be going down to the sub 8K price range where you have Scooble that we already talked about. There's going to be a couple of other guys that at least I really like. And just saying, okay, if Jameson Taillon puts up some Joe Musgrove-like game, then I'll lose and bitch about it on Twitter like I did last night when Musgrove scored 40.
So it's a win-win, basically. That's how we're approaching it. Either you lose at DFS or you get to complain on Twitter and you get some engagements out of it, which is a win anyway. But I have to agree with you, and I think everybody has to, just that Taillon's price for the matchup. 2 starts ago, he was $6,900 on DK. So he's got a ridiculous price increase. Now, his last 3 starts came against 2 against Boston, 1 against Houston. Obviously, those are totally different quality of matchups. But in general, he's been a guy who's been priced in the mid to low 7K range, even the high 6K range for the entire season. He's only scored over 20 fantasy points, I believe, twice the entire year. So he's a guy who I still believe in Taillon overall as being a quality big league pitcher. But still, he has a 23% strikeout rate in terms of earned run average, 4.36, 4.1 expected ERA. He's been a very middle of the road pitcher in a positive matchup, and he's very priced up for it. So all that looks appropriate. It's just the ownership is a little bit too high for me. 7,900 on FanDuel. I think that's appealing, but once again, the ownership's already there for him. So Taillon, I'm a little lighter on him in the field, but I think he's worth being in the player pool. Stacking against him, even for leverage purposes, I don't think makes a whole lot of sense. But now let's talk about Zach Thompson a little bit in this matchup he has against the Yankees, because this Yankees offense, I think, is going to have going to hit a crazy amount of home runs to finish the year, as long as everything stays good from a health standpoint. I just want to check, did we get a starting lineup for the Yankees yet?
Yeah, it is good. Gleyber Torres, Joey Gallo, Aaron Judge, Anthony Rizzo, Giancarlo Stanton, Gary Sanchez, Rougned Odor, Tyler Wade, pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, other than the Odor, Tyler Wade at the bottom of the lineup, the rest of that lineup is pretty daunting. I'm not a big fan of Zach Thompson, just from a standpoint of, this is something we've had to talk about him a lot recently, you and I, because Zach Thompson had a game where he was supposed to pitch as a long reliever, ended up not pitching as a long reliever. So we had to talk about him again the next day when he was expected to start. Then he had another game that got rained out, so he started the other day. So like Zach Thompson, I think you and I have talked about him like 4 times over the course of 10 days. But just to reiterate some of the same talking points with Zach Thompson, he's had a lot of success at the big league level this year. 2.45 ERA, 3.53 expected ERA. He's never really been all that good in the minor leagues. He has had individual seasons where he's found a little bit of success, but 2021 in AAA, he had a 6.6 ERA, 4.65 FIP. In 2019 in AAA with the White Sox, 5.5 ERA, 5.25 FIP. He's also 27 years old. He's considered a non-prospect. Going forward, I don't think he's going to be a particularly good pitcher. I know that at times you felt a little bit differently than I do on him, but do you want to stack the Yankees offense against him in the spot just because of all the power that we see in this lineup now?
Yeah, like I feel differently than you on Thompson's future prospects and his talent level, but we get to the same conclusion here. I will stack teams like the Yankees that have this much power in their lineup when they're getting, 1 to 2% ownership. Most chances I get. It's a little bit more difficult tonight because you do have 29 other teams to choose from. You do have them playing in Miami, which is a tough place to hit. And in my opinion, they're facing a pretty good pitcher in Thompson, who's done a very good job of not only getting strikeouts this year, but also limiting power. 101 expected ISO to lefties, 156 to righties. But all that being said, the Yankees are one of several teams that we'll talk about on this slate that I think the spot isn't very good. There's nothing that I can point to, whether it be the pitcher, whether it be the park, the weather. There's nothing I can point to that says, oh, this makes it even better for the Yankees. But I can point to this lineup has Joey Gallo, Aaron Judge, Anthony Rizzo, Giancarlo Stanton, and Gary Sanchez hitting back to back to back to back to back. If nobody else is going to play them, I think it's profitable to just play them and hope that they do what those guys do.
Yeah, I think that relative to the ownership, if you're playing 150 lineups, you want to be at least double the field on the Yankees when they're picking up 2% ownership, a number that can even end up being lower by the time we get to lock, just because it looks like the priority for everybody's going to be paying up for pitching. But if you want to roster one of these cheaper pitchers that we've talked about, like throwing Scooble or something like that to mix with Corbin Burns or Lance Lynn, I do think the Yankee stacks are a good way to go. They don't look like they're getting enough ownership. And there are going to be a bunch of days this year to close out where it's like, oh, look, the Yankees scored 12 runs and hit 5 home runs today. A lot of them are going to happen at Yankee Stadium and not when they're playing in a park like Miami. But either way, this is going to be a very good offense the rest of the way. And to me, that was really the key. I wasn't sure if we were going to see guys like Gallo or Rizzo in the lineup right after the trade. But hey, those guys are in there. This is going to be a really good offense going forward.
Who are they missing today? Urshela and is Odor actually a starter for them?
I'm trying to think who would normally be in the lineup. It does feel like they're still missing.
Well, they didn't trade Voit, I guess. So I guess he'll be there.
Yeah, I don't know where they play him though. I guess DH when it's American League. Yeah. Hey, that's going to be a lot of strikeouts, a lot of homers. You know where it's going to get really interesting with the Yankees when we see them going up against a pitcher with a little bit of strikeout upside, like Eduardo Rodriguez, where we know like, oh my, he's either going to strike out 15 guys or give up 8 home runs, and those are extremes. Except that those are the kind of decisions we're going to have to make when the Yankees are facing a pitcher with strikeout upside, because a lineup with Judge, Stanton, Joey Gallo, Gary Sanchez, that is a lot of power and a lot of strikeouts. There's going to be some crazy swings of variance.
There's going to be a lot of like zigging and zagging on the Yankees. When they have a tough matchup, so people aren't playing them, I'll be playing Yankees bats. When they're in like a boom or bust matchup and everybody's playing them, I'll be playing the pitcher and then probably just losing money that way. But yeah, it's just going to be a lot of doing the opposite of what everyone else wants to do with the Yankees, I think.
Oh, DJ LeMahieu, as everybody was quick to it is so hard to keep track of all these rosters at this point. By the way, LeMahieu's kind of an obvious one, except I have so many names on my head of players who have been traded and not the ones who've just been on teams and already played well. But
I was staring at Torres leading off, and I was like, that's not right, but I can't place who it is. I kept thinking Brett Gardner. I was like, it's not Brett Gardner.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it kind of is Brett Gardner, other than he stinks and shouldn't even really be in the lineup most days anyway, with all the power they have. But I think they weren't even intending on playing him this year until Aaron Hicks got injured, and then he just got thrown back out there. But that aside, next game here, the Boston Red Sox against the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays just always struggle along as an above-average team, but generally not making huge splashes at the trade deadline. They're going to have Josh Fleming on the mound going up against Martin Perez for the Red Sox. I don't expect Fleming to go very deep into the game. That in itself is enough reason for me to not roster him. But in a game that's largely going to be a bullpen game for Tampa Bay, I don't want to stack Boston. As good as their offense is, the Rays have a good bullpen.
Yeah, pretty much the same spot that I'm in. I do think you can kind of make the same argument for Boston that you do for the Yankees, where they just have a lot of really good hitters and they're getting even less ownership than New York. So, I don't mind if you go there. Like, they actually have this exact same top stack percentage as the Yankees do. So I think that makes sense. But I do kind of prefer the Yankee side just because I think you're going to get – I think Thompson is better than Fleming, but I think that if they get to Thompson, whatever comes in behind Thompson is going to be worse than whatever comes in behind Fleming. So I do give a slight edge to the Yankees, but I think it's kind of just a very similar spot. Bad park to hit indoors, not a favorable matchup, but a bunch of really good hitters at no ownership.
And then on the other side, Martin Perez. The Rays are not picking up much ownership, but I've rarely stack heavily against Martin Perez. He's a guy who bad underlying numbers with a 5.31 expected ERA, 4.49 FIP, but he's outperformed his peripheral numbers in a lot of recent seasons. Last year, he had a 4.5 ERA, 4.7 expected ERA, just because he doesn't give up a whole lot of runs at once. He has a fairly high ground ball rate and does an okay job at limiting damage against them. So if you look at Martin Perez, he has not allowed more than 3 runs in a start since June 13th against the Red Sox. And overall for the season, he's only had 3 starts where he's allowed more than 3 runs. So I don't think this is a bad spot for the Rays by any stretch. I just don't think there's usually a whole lot of upside in targeting Martin Perez, just because he's so consistently a guy who's like, hey, 6 innings, 3 runs, and he was no good, but the offense he was against wasn't great either.
Yeah, I mean, I do like that we're getting no ownership on a team that has an implied total approaching 5, and that the Rays do have quite a bit of right-handed power. You have Nelson Cruz back in the lineup, which is nice. But like you said, Perez typically does a pretty good job of limiting power. He has allowed 1.24 home runs per 9 this year, but this park downplays home runs as well. And his actual ISO allowed to righties is only 162. Even his expected ISO is 182. So I don't think it's a great spot. I do like the ownership, but with being a 15-game slate, there are just a lot of low-owned teams as well. So I think Tampa is certainly a good stack in terms of leverage. They're just kind of middle of the pack for me. I feel, I guess, kind of similarly to them as I do the Red Sox and the Yankees, where I assume because they're getting such little ownership in 150 max, I'll get to them. I doubt that they'll end up in being a 3 max stack for me, although I could see it being like my third team.
Yeah, I just there's so few slates where I end up stacking against Martin Perez just for the reasons I mentioned before. Also, in terms of home runs, he's given up multiple home runs, still only twice the entire season. He's also had a whole bunch of starts who's got no home runs. So not somebody I generally like to pick on, even if oftentimes the offenses look under-owned against him. It's just he doesn't generally be a guy who gives up a whole bunch of runs. That in the top of the order for the Rays is a little bit pricey. Next game here is going to be a pretty important pitching matchup. Corbin Burnes against Toki Toussaint, with Corbin Burnes going up against the Atlanta Braves with no Ronald Acuna. Even if Burnes was to give a couple of home runs, his strikeout stuff is so good. If you look at our MLB top props tool, he is one of the best bets of the night for over 7.5 strikeouts, something we have hitting 70% of the time. I don't really think we're going to differ too much here. We both like Corbin Burnes. The question just becomes, how much Corbin Burnes do you want to play tonight, Adam?
Yeah, I want to play a lot. One thing to note, one difference between the strategy show and now, we do have Corbin Burnes projected higher than Lance Lynn, which is in line with what I thought should be the case. This morning, we didn't have it that way. Josh didn't have it that way either. But now we do have Burnes projected higher. We have him with a higher top 2 pitcher percentage, getting a little bit more ownership than Lynn, but not much. He just far and away has the highest strikeout percentage on this slate, 36.6%. He's allowed 0.26 home runs per 9 this year, 2.18 xFIP, only walking 4.5% of hitters. He's just on a different level than any other pitcher on this slate, and he's not really that expensive. The only negative I can point to for Burnes is that we do have heat and humidity in Atlanta tonight. So whereas you do have some pitchers pitching indoors and you have some pitchers facing really weak offenses, the Braves do have power and can do damage. The weather will help, but again, Burnes is just so good that I don't care all that much. I still expect to get to a lot of Corbin Burnes here.
And then what do you make of Toki Toussaint on the other side? Because he's a former top pitching prospect who really had not panned out in the major leagues to this point. Struggled a little bit in the minor leagues this year also, but gets called up to the big leagues. He's pitched very well in his first couple of starts, 1.32 ERA, 2.88 expected ERA. Something that he's changed about his pitching repertoire is going very heavily with a sinker this year. That's led to a 29.4% K rate. Has he made any material changes here that make you think that he's a viable DFS play today?
Yeah, as long as he's low owned, because I think this is a very, very risky spot. But right now we have Toussaint getting 2% ownership on DraftKings. If that holds, I really like it in tournaments for a couple of reasons. For one, he's fully stretched out. He's been going 90 plus pitches. There's no concern there. He's only 6,900. You mentioned that he has the really high strikeout percentage through his first 2 games in the majors this year at 29.5%. He backs it up with a 30+% strikeout percentage at AAA this year as well, 35.2%. Now, we did have a 15.5% walk percentage. The walks haven't been there through his first 2 major league starts, but it would be very, very surprising if the walks don't show up in the major leagues after being there for his entire career and also being there at AAA this year. That's just not really how it works. So they'll come around. So he's a very, very risky option. But on top of that, you also have ownership going to the Brewers. So if Toki Toussaint goes out and actually, puts up a good start, goes 6 innings, strikes out 8 guys, not only are you getting a low-owned big outing from a $6,900 pitcher, but 10% or so of the field just basically took an L because the Brewers didn't do anything. So you get that working in your favor as well. Very, very risky play. If his ownership comes up between now and lock, I will gladly just kind of move away from him. But the way it stands right now, the combination of his personal ownership and the Brewers' ownership and his strikeout upside makes me very interested in him at sub 7K.
Yeah, I assume he's going to remain low owned just because of all the ownership that's projected to go to the Brewers right now. We have the Brewers projecting for the most ownership of any offense on the entire slate. It's not hard to see why. Even though Toki Toussaint has pitched well this year, it's only 2 starts. If you look at his career numbers, they're really no good. He had, the last time we saw him pitch last year, 8.88 ERA, 6.83 expected ERA. So over the course of his entire career, he has a 5.38 ERA. So I think a lot of people are just looking past the 13 innings he's pitched this year. But he has made some actual changes to his repertoire that make me think, hey, maybe he's discovered something. We also do know that he was really well regarded when he first got called up to the big leagues. And then also just looking at this ownership for the Brewers, it's not hard to envision a scenario where Toussaint just regresses to the guy he was last year, pitches Noel, and the Brewers go out and score a whole bunch of runs. But as it stands right now with this ownership data, I like Toussaint as a contrarian pitching option, and I have no interest in the Brewers as the most popular stack of the day.
Yeah, and 2 other quick notes on Toussaint. First of all, one reason I don't think that we see his ownership go up either is right now we don't have $7,200 Logan Gilbert in the ownership projections. Once he's in there, he's going to siphon ownership from that price range. So that's not going to do anything to increase Toussaint's. And then also, this is the perfect example of when you make tournament lineups, you're not really that worried about what someone's going to do on average. You're trying to get guys that when they do well are just going to have the ability to do so much better than similarly priced guys will do when those guys do well. And that's why Toussaint's appealing here at low ownership, because his 80th percentile outcome is just so much better than most pitchers in this price range, because they just don't have the ability to strike guys out like Touki Toussaint can when he's on. And as far as the Brewers, I'm with you. Basically, everything I said about the Tigers, I think applies to the Brewers here. They're in a high upside spot. Toussaint is definitely better than Matt Harvey, but they're still in a high upside spot. They're facing a pitcher that's had walk issues his whole career. He certainly could get himself in trouble really quickly in a game where the weather is very favorable for hitting. But there's just no real reason, I don't think, to go to a Milwaukee team that's getting all this ownership. For example, the Brewers have a 4.7 implied run total. The Rays are at 4.8. Implied run totals aren't everything. I get that, but you can't tell me that the Brewers are 10 times as likely to be the top stack as the Rays, given the fact that the Rays have a slightly higher implied run total. And that's just the first team that I point to. There's plenty of other examples.
Yeah, I think all that makes sense. And we're on the same page here. I think Touki Toussaint, GPP play, he actually looks like one of the strongest low-owned GPP options because, number one, I think the range of outcomes is wide with him. Number two, he's going up against a very chalky offense in the Brewers, especially for a 15-game slate. So Touki Toussaint, SP2, give that to me in tournaments. Now, here's a good segue. Not this was planned at all, totally coincidence, but you had just said that you mentioned that Touki Toussaint potentially even losing ownership because Logan Gilbert has now been confirmed as the starting pitcher for the Seattle Mariners. This is the next spot to talk about here. Logan Gilbert against the Texas Rangers. And Gilbert is not just pitching against the Texas Rangers. He's pitching against the Texas Rangers that no longer have Joey Gallo in the lineup. So Gallo, I know a lot of people say, oh, Gallo strikes out a lot. That's true. Gallo is still one of the better hitters in baseball. His WRC plus well above league average. This is a really watered down Rangers lineup that Logan Gilbert is facing. A little hard to know exactly what to make of his ownership because we don't have that right now. But right now, with the information we have, what do you make of Logan Gilbert as a play?
I don't know what his ownership is, so this isn't ownership based, but I think he's the best pitching play in the slate at 7,200. And that includes Corbin Burns and Lance Lynn at their salaries. Logan Gilbert has been excellent this year. I'm a little bitter because he had a chance to make me a lot of money last Saturday and he shit the bed in the third inning, but he's been excellent. He's made 12 starts with the Mariners. He's one of the top pitching prospects in baseball. He's made 12 starts with the Mariners. He has struck out 28.8% of hitters. He's only walked 5.5%, 3.82 xFIP, 0.79 home runs per nine. He has just across the board been very, very good. The stuff is great. There's just nothing, the pedigree is there. There's nothing that you point to and say, oh yeah, Logan Gilbert's not a legitimate pitcher. And now he's going up against this Texas team at $7,200. Like you said, no Joey Gallo in the lineup. The only, I guess, negative you could point to is that this Rangers lineup maybe doesn't strike out that much, but I still think Gilbert's going to be able to do enough on his own. Like he's just so much better than the hitters in this Texas lineup. I absolutely love Logan Gilbert here.
Yeah, everything looks good for Logan Gilbert on paper. Came into the year as one of the top prospects overall in baseball. And he's one of these guys who has found success not only right away at the big leagues. If you look at his minor league numbers, he's been excellent at every single level he's gone to. 2019 in A-ball, he had a 1.59 ERA. They called him up to high A-ball. He had a 1.73 ERA. Then he went up to Double-A. He had a 2.88 ERA. This year in Triple-A, it was only one start, but whatever. He gave up one run in 5 innings. Comes up to the big leagues this year, 3.81 ERA, 3.58 expected ERA, 28.8% K rate. I have to assume he ends up being a chalk pitcher on the slate. If he isn't, then I think people are just making a mistake because everything to me with Logan Gilbert looks really excellent. But once again, that's something that coming up after us, we're going to have MLB Live before lock, and those guys will have a little bit clearer of an idea for what some of the ownership is and whatnot for some of these pitchers. But as it stands right now, I really do like Logan Gilbert, same as Adam. And then also, guys, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel because Live Before Lock is coming up next, and they're going to have a little more info on the situation. On the other side, Kobe Allard against the Mariners, I don't really have interest in either side.
So on Gilbert, I was going to say, I do expect him to be popular. I just don't really care. I think he should be more expensive than Jameson Taillon tonight. I think he should be more expensive than Sonny Gray. So I really don't care if he ends up being 35% owned. And as far as the Texas lineup goes, I mentioned the strikeout percentages. There are 5 guys in this lineup. Kiner Falefa, Holt, Ibanez, Heim, Martin, that have struck out less than 20% of the time this year. So that's like the only real negative to point to. But, again, I just think that he should be able to get strikeouts on his own. On the other side, I am interested in Kolby Allard just because he's 5,100. He's pulling some ownership right now. I do think he's someone that you probably see the 20% ownership on him come down once Logan Gilbert is added to the ownership projections, because I don't think it'll be that difficult to just find 2K to get up to $7,200 Gilbert. But I do think Allard is just cheaper than he should be. He probably should be like 6,500 or something like that. The Mariners are not a pushover. They do have right-handed power. Allard can struggle with that. He's allowed a 204 expected ISO to righties this year, but he's also just, I think, a little bit better pitcher than 5,100. I think he's a little better. I think he's better than Matt Harvey. I think he's better than Will Crow. If I'm going to the 5K range, I think he is the guy that projects the best. Granted, he also is not 20 times as likely to, have success as Crow or Harvey. So you can make that ownership pivot if you want, but I think Allard is, just ignoring ownership, the best of the 5K guys.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say about that is right now he is projected for a lot of ownership. I do expect that to come down. But the other thing also is, we still don't have a starting lineup for the Nationals or the Cubs last I looked, but those are going to be two really cheap offense in decent spots. It is going to be so easy to find value at offense. I just don't think there's going to be a need to get to somebody as cheap as Kolby Allard. Like, we could just pay up a couple $1,000s more to get to Logan Gilbert on the other side of the game. So it's just a price range I don't see myself getting to. I just don't think it's going to be necessary when I'm building my lineups in Fantasy Cruncher and I just see all these cheap hitters that are viable for today. So I doubt I have anybody priced, below Toki Toussaint in my lineups today.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, I think that as the day, with the way the day has gone on, I think that Allard's need probably comes down a bit. Like, if you looking on DraftKings, if you put Logan Gilbert and Corbin Burns into your lineup, you still have $4,000 per position. Even if you go to a team who is, averaging around 5K per salary, I don't think it's gonna be that difficult to get, guys below 3K to kind of just round out your lineup once we get the rest of these lineups.
All right, next game here, it is going to be Lance Lynn on the mound against Cleveland, JC Mejia on the mound against the White Sox. Now, let's just start with Lance Lynn. Once again, kind of like we talked about Corbin Burns, there's going to be no dispute here. Lance Lynn is a strong play to pay up for. The question then just becomes, is we have to compare some of these guys when there's so many high-end pitching options, so many guys to compare to each other on the slate. I think a lot of lineup decisions, especially for our audience, who I know a lot of people are playing single entry, they're playing cash games, maybe playing 3 lineups. My preference is to play Corbin Burns over Lance Lynn today. I think both of them are good plays. You should get exposure to both of them if you're making a lot of lineups. My preference is to play more of Corbin Burns. Our data seems to agree with that. Also, the ownership is about similar for these two guys, but Corbin Burns a 28.4% chance being a top 2 scoring pitcher on the slate, 19% chance for Lance Lynn. My preference here is for Corbin Burns. How about for you?
Yeah, the way it looks right now, same boat for me. We have Corbin Burns 1.5 times as likely to be a top 2 pitcher as Lance Lynn. Right now, we have Burns projected to only be 1.15 as owned. And so it's a pretty easy sell to me when I get to roster the guy that far and away has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at a relatively low ownership percentage compared to the alternatives. Maybe it comes up and he gets 50%, Lynn comes down to 20, then my tune would change a little bit. But the way it looks right now, I think Lynn's great. I think the matchup's good. I think he's very good, but he is still sacrificing nearly 10 points in strikeout percentage to Corbin Burns. That's how good Burns has been.
So and that's really what it comes down to. Cash games, I probably right now on DK I go Corbin Burns, and then for FanDuel I go Corbin Burns. On DK I probably go Burns and Logan Gilbert right now. But once again, Lance Lynn, really strong play, just not one of my 2 favorite pitching plays on the slate. Probably 3rd favorite, which for a slate of this size is still a pretty good play, just not one of my overall 2 favorite pitchers of the day. But now we've talked about the White Sox as a stack. They were disappointing yesterday on the afternoon slate, but also keep in mind they played almost entirely backups. Eloy Jimenez remains out of the lineup today. His return did not last all that long. He was missed the entire start of the season with a torn pectoral muscle, comes back, and now I believe it's a groin injury that has him sidelined again. So no Eloy Jimenez for the 2nd consecutive day. But what do you make of this spot for the White Sox against JC Mejia?
Yeah, so we're going to just go back to me liking the White Sox and then the White Sox making me lose money. But 3.5% aggregate ownership going to the White Sox right now. They are running out a better lineup than they ran yesterday. And I really like the way this lineup sets up against JC Mejia. Mejia's actually been just like lights out against right-handed bats this year. He has struck out 31.9%. He's held them to a .097 ISO. Against lefties, though, 17.4% strikeout percentage, 327 actual ISO allowed, 226 expected ISO. And the White Sox are running out a lineup that has a couple of good right-handed bats in Tim Anderson and Jose Abreu, but then just lefties. Cesar Hernandez making his debut with the White Sox against his former team. He's only 3,500. Gavin Sheets only 3,300. Yohan Moncada 4,500 from the good side of the plate for him. Brian Goodwin hitting 7th. This is another guy that has power at 3,300. Even Luis Garcia hitting 8th at 3,700 will be from the left side. So the only righties, excluding Sebi Zavala, who I don't care about at all, the only righties in this lineup that are Tim Anderson, Jose Abreu, Andrew Vaughn. These guys all have enough power that I'll gladly include them in stacks too. But I just think this White Sox lineup sets up very, very well against Mejia.
All right. I have not yet brought up that the sponsor of today's show is No House Advantage. If you guys are new to No House Advantage, maybe you're overwhelmed by today's MLB DFS slate. It's like, hey, we've got 40 players on new teams. We've got all these all-stars on new teams. There's a lot of ownership concerns. We don't know what anybody's going to be owned, but we don't have to worry about any of that over at No House Advantage. That is a different way to play daily fantasy sports. It's prop-based contests, and then we have them for MLB, NBA, PGA, and NFL over there. So different way to play lineups, make it based off props. Don't have to worry about ownership or anything like that. It's also 100% peer-to-peer, so you're not playing against a book. You're just playing against your friends. So that's always a fun way also to play DFS. And if you are new to No House Advantage, head on over to the site. Use the promo code Awesemo when you make your first deposit. Get up to a $20 instant match deposit bonus. So go check that out over at No House Advantage. And, you know, that could be a different way to play DFS tonight if you're not sure about what to make of all these new players on new teams. You can just go pick out some of your favorite props for the site and play over there. All right. The next game we have here, it is going to be Griffin Jax on the mound for the Minnesota Twins. It was supposed to be Jose Barrios pitching. However, he ended up getting traded during the day. So Griffin Jax on the mound, which this does a couple of things now. Is not only does Griffin Jax, if you look at his numbers, he doesn't look any good, but the St. Louis Cardinals are cheaper than they should be, in my opinion, just because they were priced to face Jose Barrios. And now they're facing a pitcher who doesn't appear he's particularly good on paper. So the price tags here, Paul Goldschmidt's expensive, Nolan Arenado's expensive. But beyond that, everybody here is cheap in this lineup. I think this is a very affordable Cardinal stack to get to if you want to pay up for pitching.
Yeah, I'm with you. It doesn't look like Griffin Jax is any sort of prospect. He's almost 27 years old. Fangraphs has him as the number 36 ranked prospect on the Twins, which is nothing. At AAA this year, he's made 7 starts, gone 38 innings, 22.1% strikeout percentage, 3.14 FIP is good. His ground ball percentage is 40%, which isn't anything special. Infield fly ball percentage doesn't look like anything great either. I just don't expect him to be a major league level pitcher. And so I do think that it sets up pretty well for the Cardinals. And like you said, they're priced for Jose Barrios. So Goldschmidt's expensive, Arenado's expensive, but Carlson looks really good. O'Neill, Molina, Edmund, DeYoung, Harrison Bader, these guys are all pretty reasonably priced. So I think the Cardinals are a pretty strong stack here. They are projected this. I don't think our top stack tool has been updated because we only have them with a 1.8% chance of being the top stack, but that seems like it would be for Jose Barrios.
Yeah, it's the spot against Jax. It doesn't look good. And once again, the pricing is just wrong. It's spot. We don't see this happen all that often in MLB DFS. You know, occasionally there's like a Max Scherzer or Jacob deGrom gets scratched or something like that. Well, Jose Barrios isn't quite that level. The downgrade from Barrios to Griffin Jax is pretty substantial. So that makes the Cardinals a team I want to get to from a value perspective. Unfortunately, on the other side, I would like to roster a Cardinals pitcher in this spot for kind of the same reasons I want to roster the Cardinals offense, because the Twins offense is totally devastated at this point. They still have some good hitters in there, except for the most part, lineup is much weaker than it was early in the season. There's no more Nelson Cruz there, of course. And the lineup for today, it's Polanco, Rooker, Donaldson, Garver, Larnach, Sano, Gordon, Simmons. There's a lot of strikeouts to be had there. The issue is that Wade LeBlanc is just not the guy to take advantage of that situation. He's no good, so I'm not really interested in him. He also has a really low strikeout rate, but I don't want to stack the Twins either.
LeBlanc's low strikeout rate actually does make me somewhat interested in the Twins because I just always like taking bats that have power, but that also have trouble hitting the ball when they're facing a pitcher that's going to basically force them to hit it. And that's the case, like Miguel Sano at 4K. He can just do so much damage when he makes contact. And LeBlanc has only struck out 16% of righties this year, 202 ISO allowed. He's going to let Miguel Sano hit the ball, and that typically ends poorly for pitchers. You can say the same thing for guys, Mitch Garver, Josh Donaldson, Brent Rooker's got power at 3,200. So right now, the Twins not getting much ownership. I think it is a pretty good spot against LeBlanc. Not a top stack for me, but I do expect to be getting to these guys probably a little bit more in the field.
Yeah, it's Wade LeBlanc. It's just the offense to me is no good for them right now. I agree. There's a little bit of power upside. That's going to also be mitigated a little bit but then playing in the National League and losing the benefit of a DH. I'm also a little concerned that what happens when LeBlanc comes out of the game and a right-handed pitcher comes in? Do they start going to some pinch hitters here? That could be a little bit of a concern. Just trying to cut spots somewhere. I think that some of your logic there is definitely sound, and it makes a whole lot of sense. A team with power upside with strikeout issues against a pitcher that doesn't generate strikeouts. That is all sensible to me. If it wasn't a 15-game slate, if this was a 6-game slate and I was looking for a contrarian stock to get to, that would be more reasonable. They're just not going to make the cut for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's not, because like LeBlanc's not getting ownership. They're still not one of the highest top stack teams. The ownership for the Twins is pretty much in line with where it should be. There's nothing that's going to like push them to the top for me. It's just when I look at the spot, I'm like, yeah, I can see how they have a big game.
All right, we have 4 games left here to talk about, and the next one, Chris Bassitt versus Patrick Sandoval. Sandoval was terrific for us last time he went out. He was a pitcher who was very low owned and ended up pitching a near no-hitter. I'm pretty sure that was against the Twins, actually. But yep. Sandoval was really good last time out. As a result, though, one of the reasons that I like Sandoval last time out is he was really cheap in what appeared to be a good matchup and didn't have ownership. Now he's a little bit more popular than he was in his last start, and he's become really expensive, and he's a tougher matchup against Oakland. Chris Bassitt on the other side of the game, a guy who I've massively underrated as a pitcher basically the entire season, but I always have reasons that I can't get to him. And today it's just that he's in the same price range as Corbin Burnes and Lance Lynn. I don't want to stack against these pitchers, but I don't think I'm going to be playing them much either.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at too. I like Sandoval as a pitcher. I really like Bassitt as a pitcher. I just can't justify Bassitt when I can pay $600 more and get Corbin Burnes, or I can just knock $2,000 off and go like Skubal plus Gilbert or something like that. And basically the same to be said for Sandoval here against a very tough Oakland team. So I have a lot of trouble getting to either pitcher. We do have Bassitt with the third highest top 2 percentage and projected to be a little bit underowned. But with it being a 15-game slate, I just think I'll be able to find contrarian options that are a little bit easier to get to than Bassitt. The only real interest I have in this game is I do think Oakland's in a very similar spot to Boston and the Yankees, where they have a lineup top to bottom that has power, and they're getting literally no ownership, like sub 1% right now. So similar implied run total at 4.4 to the Yankees and the Red Sox. Basically the same argument as those teams. If you want to play some Oakland in large field stuff, I think it makes sense just with how good they are. I would be very surprised if I end up with them in 3 max.
Next game, we have the Los Angeles Dodgers, the revamped Los Angeles Dodgers, who are basically able to acquire Max Scherzer and Trey Turner for nothing of all that much significance. They gave up a couple of good but not great prospects. The real key here was just the Dodgers were willing to take on a lot of the money that the Nationals didn't want to have on the rosters. They're looking to rebuild. So this Dodgers lineup going up against Zach Gallen, they don't have a fully loaded offense today. I just saw this pop up, the Dodgers lineup. They are getting Corey Seager back in the lineup. However, Trey Turner isn't going to be in the lineup yet. So we have, this lineup is going to be so ridiculous. But for today, Taylor, Muncy, Seager, Will Smith, Pollock, Cody Bellinger, McKinney. That is going to round out the lineup. There's going to be a point where that lineup is going to have, like, the 8 hitter is going to be Cody Bellinger or something like that. Like, Cody Bellinger might be the worst hitter in the Cubs regular starting lineup right now. Now that they have Trey Turner, they is going to be in there when Corey Seager's in there, when they get Mookie Betts back. It is totally ridiculous. I can't see myself really ever wanting to roster pitchers against this team. So Zach Gallen, I like him as a starting pitcher, but I'm still willing to get to some of these Dodgers as a lower owned stack today.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn here because I don't understand why the Dodgers implied run total is as high as it is. The Roost closed in Arizona. Zach Gallen is a good pitcher. I don't really get it, but at the same time, I also know that typically I'm wrong and Vegas and numbers and projections are right. So because of the way I build my lineups, I'm going to get to the Dodgers the way it looks right now. They have the second highest top 2 stack percentage on the slate. They're projected to go pretty drastically underowned. So I'm going to get there. I just don't really understand why the total is as high as it is. I do think Gallen's a good pitcher. And you are talking about a Dodgers lineup that doesn't have Betts, doesn't have Trey Turner yet. They do get Seager back, which is nice. But point being here, like, I guess I'm going to roster the Dodgers the way it looks right now. I'm just putting on record that I don't like it. I'm not happy about it.
I think we can reasonably say there might be a little bit bias baked into the line, even if it doesn't affect the actual game for the Dodgers today. I think the public is going out to bet the Dodgers money line today anyway. And I think they're going to bet the over and the Dodgers just because, like, hey, they traded for Max Scherzer and Trey Turner yesterday. Neither of them are in the lineup today, but I don't necessarily think that really affects people all that much who are just public bettors. So I think that could be influencing it a little bit, but either way,
the Yankees effect.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of the Yankees effect, Dodgers, West Coast version of the Yankees. But either way, this is a team that when they're low owned, I've wanted to get overweights to field on them all year anyway. Zach Allen, I do think he's a quality pitcher, but he hasn't been all that great this year. He's a 4.80 ERA, 4.38 FIP, and he has been a little bit mistake prone. 15.9% home run fly ball rates. So there's been upside targeting against him. So yeah, Dodgers we have with the second best top stack odds of the entire day. They are the most under-owned stack, I believe, right now in our top stacks too. I think they have the best positive leverage score on all of DraftKings today. Over on FanDuel, we also have the Dodgers going a little bit under-owned, although not quite as drastically as they are on DK. So I'm going to have to get to the Dodgers just based on that data we have here. On the other side, though, it is going to be Tony Gonsolin going up against the Diamondbacks. Gonsolin looks like his pitch count is kind of slowly starting to ramp up. That also when he compounded with there's no longer Escobar in the lineup for the Diamondbacks. They traded him away to the Brewers. So I think the Diamondbacks, another team who just kind of tore down everything that they could at the trade deadline. There's going to be a bad offense going forward. Are you going to start to get on Tony Gonsolin now that it looks like he's starting to get a little bit more stretched out?
I think it's still difficult here just because Logan Gilbert exists and because Tarek Skubal exists and Tuki Toussaint exists. I won't be upset if I get to a little bit of Gonsolin just because I do think he's good. I think he should have plenty of success against the Diamondbacks. If you get him to throw 85 or 90 pitches here, then he's likely to have a pretty good game. I just still think he comes out a little bit behind those guys, and that'll make it difficult for me to prioritize him. If he were like even 7K flat, I think it would be a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable to say also is I agree. I prefer Logan Gilbert. For leverage purposes, I prefer Toki Toussaint, but Gonsolin with only 5% projected ownership right now on DK, and I'm going to refresh just to see if we have Logan Gilbert in here now because that is going to... No, we do not yet. But still Gonsolin. And by the way, that ownership is probably going to go down when we get Gilbert in there. So Tony Gonsolin potentially like 3 or 4% projected ownership. A positive matchup. Also, Gonsolin's been over 80 pitches now in 2 consecutive starts. And I think that number could start to go up from here. So Gonsolin, once again, I think he's a guy to be not crazy high on, but I'm going to have more than the field at 4%. That's where I stand on him.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense.
The next game we have here, it is going to be Kevin Gausman on the mound for the Giants. Kevin Gausman, who I have all kinds of concerns with, his last couple of starts have not been good at all. And not that he ever had a realistic chance to win the National League Cy Young, but if you went to sports books prior to his last couple of starts, Gausman had the second best betting odds to win the Cy Young behind Jacob deGrom. So if anybody was taking a chance, they'd say like, hey, deGrom might miss the rest of the season because of an arm injury or anything like that. I think a lot of people might have looked to Gausman as the guy to bet. And even though Gausman's numbers overall for the season look very strong, 2.21 ERA, 3.23 expected ERA, there are some massive red flags for him as of late. Last couple of starts, 7 strikeouts to 7 walks. Last time out, a matchup against the Pirates, which should have been really easy. 2 strikeouts, 4 walks, gave up 6 runs in 4 1/3 innings. I'm pretty low on Kevin Gausman going forward. I think some heavy regression is coming, and there's other better guys to pay up for.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm quite as low on him going forward, but I don't really see the need to get to him here either. It's a tough matchup against Houston. They don't strike out a lot. He's in that same kind of dead zone price range where you have Chris Bassett, you have Sonny Gray, you have Tyon a little bit cheaper. I think I'd rather go to Gausman than Bassett just because the strikeout stuff is better, but I just doubt that I really get to either one. I just don't really think I'll get much exposure to that price range in general, especially because the matchup against Houston is a difficult one.
Yeah, he's somebody who's not going to be on a player pool. I haven't been on him recently, and that is not going to change today in this spot against Houston. Even though I've been lower on Gausman than a lot of people as late, I'm not looking to roster the Astros in this spot. I still think Gausman proposes more of an issue than a lot of the other pitchers on the slate. And there's also other offense I prefer to pay up for that are contrarian and in good spots. So the Houston Astros today, we only have with a 1.8% chance to be a top stack on the slate. Not a lot of ownership going there, but still, I'd rather get to contrarian spots to pay up for, like the Los Angeles Dodgers, the New York Yankees we talked about. So Houston Astros aren't going to make the cut for me, but neither is their pitcher, Framber Valdez. He's somebody else who just becomes a victim because of the size of the slate. That and the Giants offense has been, just chugging along as a team that I keep expecting to regress and never does. So Framber Valdez, Kevin Gausman, 2 guys that I think are above average pitchers overall in the context of the slate, but guys aren't going to make it into my lineups.
Yeah, I have basically nothing from this game. Valdez is in that same price range. The only difference really between him and Gossman is instead of having a 29% strikeout percentage like Gossman, Valdez is at 21%. So it makes it even more difficult for him to basically, be a guy that you have to have. The matchup against the Giants isn't great either. So I don't really see getting there. And I don't see getting to the bats with any sort of frequency either, because both pitchers are good, I think. And the park does a lot to suppress power and offense.
So we just got a this is such a bad lineup. The Nationals, did you see the Nationals lineup?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, this is such a bad lineup. We just had a news guy, El Negro Loco, posted it in the YouTube chat, in our Slack chat. Here it is. It is Stevenson, Escobar, Soto. I feel so bad for Juan Soto. He's such a good hitter. Bell, Garcia, Barrera, Parra, Keyboom, and then Paulo Espino is pitching. So just circling back on something, we only have a few minutes left, something that the Live Before Lock guys are going to have to cover. It's coming up right after us. Nationals lineup, first thoughts, anybody that stands out as a value play, because for the most part, this is a cheap lineup.
Andrew Stevenson's 2K leading off, and he's fast. So, I mean, you can go there if you want. But as far as guys that I actually want to roster, it's still limited to Juan Soto and Josh Bell.
Yeah, I think those still Stevenson leading off, min price on both sites. That is a reasonable enough spot to get to. Final game on the slate here, and then we will hand it over to the Live Before Lock crew. We have John Gray on the mound for the Colorado Rockies going up against Ryan Weathers for the Padres. Weathers I don't expect to work very deep into the game, probably largely going to be a bullpen game for the Padres. But pitchers in this spot, I don't think we're going to have any interest in them, but what do you make of the offenses?
I have some interest in the Padres here. For one, I'm really surprised John Gray is still on the Rockies. I think that's the case for everybody. But the Padres are getting some ownership, about 4% on DraftKings. They have about a 4.5% chance of being the top stack. That's seventh highest on the slate right now. So they're a team that, I kind of always like to get to when they're low owned, just like we talked about with the Yankees, the Red Sox, and those other teams. One thing that I think does hurt them a little bit, though, is even though they do have a higher top stack percentage, it's not drastically higher. They're coming in at 4.4%. You have Oakland at 3.8, Tampa Bay at 3.4, the Yankees and the Red Sox at 3, and you're getting 4% ownership going to San Diego in the aggregate compared to like 1% from the other teams that I think also have really high ceilings. So I throw them in that same bucket with them, where I'll probably get a little bit in 150 max. I don't think they'll jump to the top in 3 max for me.
And then one other thing to add about John Gray, and then we can do some closing thoughts for the slate. John Gray today, if you go to the MLB player props tool over at Awesemo.com, free tool to use, is very helpful for betting purposes. His over-under is 5.5 strikeouts today. We have the under hitting 80% of the time. There's a little bit of juice on it, but that is the best overall ROI bet on the day. So under 5.5 strikeouts for John Gray, that is a 45% expected ROI. That is the top bet that we have on the day for any kind of player prop. So we still have a couple minutes left before we hand it over. So I want to mention also, like I said before, No House Advantage sponsoring the show. If you guys are new to the site, head on over there. Use the promo code Awesemo to make your first deposit. Get up to a $20 match deposit bonus. Also, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Stick around for Live Before Lock. But let's close with this, Adam, really quick. Do you have a home run pick for today?
Vlad. I didn't have anything prepared, so I'm just gonna cop out.
Yeah, we just had it's like that wonky time left where it's like, all right, I have to kill the time here because it's the time limit. We have to go up against the to carry over to the next show. We have to kill the time. But like, what are we going to talk about in a minute other than just a quick home run pick? But I'll bring up on our top props tool, Mike Yastrzemski plus 750 at home run. That has a 14% chance we haven't projected for it at home run. That makes for a positive bet. So that's something that stands out to me. But other than that, sorry for putting you on the spot. I think that Vlad is always going to be a reasonable choice.
I'll go Trey Mancini as a more acceptable answer.
Okay, Trey Mancini had a great showing in the home run derby. Also close to home for Adam. So maybe a little bit of bias baked in, but either way, a reasonable home run pick. That is going to do it for us today, guys. If we haven't done it already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stick around because MLB Live Before Lock is next.
strikeouts. We used to go bowling with strikeouts and defense.
So I guess we're going. Hey, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. Just kidding. It's the Live Before Lock show. I screwed that up. You know what? It's on my sheet. I wrote it wrong. It's fine. Nobody knows what's going on. It's a 15-gamer. My brain is fried, not just from studying baseball, not just from trying to give you guys the best content we possibly can, but because the trade deadline was absolutely insane, especially for your New York Yankees. How are you doing? Terry McBride at DigitalB21 on the Twitter sphere. How you doing, my dude?
I'm doing great. I think I said it on the intro to the show yesterday when I was on with Greg, but man, my trade deadline was like the exact opposite of your day when got traded out that day we were on live. Then the Rizzo trade dropped while we were on the stream yesterday, so I got to have the exact opposite experience. But man, what a great job by Cashman. What an awesome, ridiculous, fun trade deadline. I was just saying to you, I've said it in a few chats, I officially want a petition to have the NBA draft and the MLB trade deadline the same 36-hour window every summer. I mean, it was so much fun the last 2 days.
Never seen anything like it. This is everything the NBA trade deadline wishes it was. It seemed it was. I've never seen anything like this in any sport. And yes, Loco, we can all have our collective brains fried here today. How you doing, my dude? Of course, he's keeping us apprised of anything. Looks like we're good on the weather front here, which is very surprising considering we have every single team in play here. 15 gamer to get to. I won't just screw around here at the top of the show. I know everybody wants to. Saw somebody said 200 likes for me to freestyle rap the outro. Sure, get us 250 likes and I'll consider something. We'll figure it out. But 15 gamer, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We put in a ton of work for you. Terry McBride over there, always doing his best to give you all of the goods. What do you see out of this slate? Just from a general overview, if I dare ask, with 30 teams in play. What do you see being the major key to this slate for you today?
So I think we've got a fair amount of good pitchers to choose from in some pretty different tiers of pricing. So there are good options. The guys on the last show were talking about a guy like Logan Gilbert, I think is super interesting. I think Kobe Allard, even on the other side of that game, could be somewhat interesting. Looks like our ownership update just dropped. So I'm really curious to see where Gilbert comes out in that. I'm just updating my sheet now as I'm talking it through. But I think just the pitching combinations they're pretty robust. So there are a lot of different ways to put together good high-end starter with quality second starter type guy. You can do the double pay up for pitching because there are plenty of cheap bats to choose from. So I think there's a really, really significant amount of different combinations, different viable approaches to this slate, given all the pitching options. I mean, even, halfway down the board, you can get like Vince Velasquez. I know he's not anybody's favorite. He's I take him down every time I talk about him. But for 6,300 on FanDuel, and I don't actually have his DK price in front of me, 7,700 on DK, going up against that miserable Pirates lineup. Like there's upside for even a guy like that going all the way down the board. So there's just interesting choices, top, bottom, and center on this slate. So I really like the look of it. I think it's a good one to really spread out on and get to a lot of different ranges of outcomes.
I want to talk about miserable lineups. How about that Marlins lineup too? I mean, I cannot really wrap my head around it. Brian De La Cruz, welcome to the major leagues, my friend. What in the living hell? But of course, today we're also, I got to bring up our sponsor at the top of the show because I absolutely love our sponsor, No House Advantage. They are such a fun site. They are peer-to-peer gaming. You need to check them out here as well. And also, as I'm here at the top of the show, Betting You Read. Look at this. Today's show is brought to you also by our new podcast, Betting You. Who wins the Heisman, the Georgia dethroning Alabama this season, MAC teams. You want to talk about the most obscure, the most incredible things to have edges. College football has a ton of them available. And right now, my dude, Ben Rasa and Matt Gajewski, who's just one of the sharpest guys you will ever meet in this industry. They sit around and they talk all things college football betting. Episodes available on every podcast platform, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Check them out today. All righty. We'll talk some more about No House Advantage later, but it is time to go to the top of pitching here. So Corbin Burns, Lance Lynn. I guess the right question is which one you prefer. I know you play on that blue side over there, the old FanDuel. Looking at their ownership nearly identical, who are you siding with more today?
So I think I would give the edge to Burns just based on the overall strikeout upside. You get a Braves lineup that now also includes Adam Duvall. They rushed him up from Miami. He had his old jersey in the car, so he's able to play tonight. 31% strikeout rate dropped into the middle of that lineup. Quality hitter, ton of power, no doubt about it. There's plenty of power threat in that lineup from Jock Peterson, Freddie Freeman, Austin Riley, even Dansby Swanson at shortstop. But I just think the overall strikeout upside, that combined roster averages a 23.8% strikeout rate for the confirmed lineup. Burns is sitting at a 36.6% mark on the season over 102 innings and 17 starts. He's just been spectacular, and the line has been really clean. 4.5% walk rate, 2.18 xFIP, 0.90 whip, inducing 16% swinging strikes. Only allows a 3% barrel ball rate. Only allows a 28.7% hard hit rate, 85.4 mile an hour average exit velo. There's everything to love about Burns here. I like the idea that he's more expensive. His ownership went up from where it was this morning on FanDuel. I liked that he was a little bit more expensive than Lynn and drawing less ownership. I think that's still the case, but I think it's gotten a lot closer. So it's Burns based on the strikeouts, but if you need to save the money, I don't hate going to Lynn against that Cleveland team either.
I'm right there with you. Corbin Burns is the priority for me. Highest strikeout rate on the entire slate here, sitting at 36.6% K percentage. If you go to Baseball Savant and you just take a look at his underlying metrics, it's all bright red. That's good. Like, those are good things to be looking at on the board. There's no issue going to Corbin Burns. I would say for me, I am trying to get a little bit different in large field tournaments, even in some 3-max stuff, trying to find a pitcher or two that can maybe not match the upside, but at lesser cost for sure allow me to get some other looks in. No problem going to Lynn or him, but Corbin Burns definitely the priority. Working our way down the board, Terry, this next grouping of guys over on the DK slate, Chris Bassett, Kevin Gausman, Sonny Gray, all kind of like middling ownership. It seems like it's pay up for the 10K guy, pay to the 7K range kind of a day over on DraftKings, and maybe rightfully so. But is there anybody else in this next grouping of pitchers, either on DK or on FanDuel, that stands out to you?
So, I mean, I think at the very least, Chris Bassett deserves a mention on the DK slate just because he's going significantly under-owned as compared to the other guys. Those other guys you mentioned are owned around where they, quote-unquote, should be based on our probability of being a top 2 starter over there, where Chris Bassett, who's been spectacularly good all season long, I mean, not Corbin Burns good, where he said a 36% strikeout rate, but he's been very, very good, pitching above expectations all year, is going, 3 times under-owned. So I kind of like that spot if you're looking for a guy from this price range. I just think the slate kind of plays more to what you were describing, where it's you go up to those 10K guys and then you combine them with somebody cheaper like a Logan Gilbert who's slotting in there. We see Logan Gilbert with significant ownership on him now, though, too. So we've got to take that under consideration. But you've got other guys in that next tier down, like Tariq Skubal going up against Baltimore. Volatile guy, gives up a ton of hard hit, but only costs $7,500. Tony Gonsolin against that really bad Arizona lineup comes to mind. He's also pulling positive leverage. So there are interesting other ways to go for similar kind of leverage from Bassett, but I think he at least warrants consideration based on how good he's been. And he's going up and against an Angels lineup that it's good, but I don't think it's one of the absolute premium lineups on this slate. There's a lot of holes in that lineup. There's certainly plenty of strikeouts, 24.1% strikeout rate for the projected lineup on the slate tonight. 25% strikeout rate on the year for Bassett, over 130 innings and 21 starts. So it gives you that depth you're looking for a quality start, potential win bonus on the FanDuel slate. So I kind of like him on both sites today. I think I like him better on DK, where you're getting that significant ownership share at where you need to get to 2 starters, though.
Right. I have no problem with him, but he's maybe it's just an oversight. I missed the train riding it up there to the top. I'm probably not going to be going too crazy here now. But the other guys in this range, is there anybody else now as we're going down here a little bit further? I guess the one guy to bring over on DK, 8,700 seems like an overpay for Jameson Taillon until you see what the Marlins just drug out. And it's, complete shit. That's what it is. So talk to me about Jameson Taillon, because he's an important talking point.
Yeah, I believe that is the scientific term for that lineup that they're rolling out there.
It was my higher language coming through.
So, yeah, Taillon is at least interesting going up against this team. He's sitting at a 23.1% strikeout rate on the year. He induces 12.2% swinging strikes, which is pretty good. He's subpar in CSW percentage, combined called strikes and swinging strikes, 27.7%. You'd like to see that a little bit better, working around the plate a little bit more, but that's not really the way that he pitches. So he's an okay option, allows a 9.5% barrel ball rate, a 21.8 degree average launch angle with 40.4% hard hit rate. that plays to home run upside, but there are not a lot of home run hitters in this lineup now. So I think, yeah, if you're playing it just to attack that weak lineup, I think he's perfectly serviceable. The price is right. So he kind of makes sense, 7,900 on FanDuel if you wanted to take out a few limited shares. 11% ownership, though. I don't know that I want to go to like 20% ownership on FanDuel on Jameson Taillon just to get out of the field, though. So maybe it's more of an undercut where you grab a few shares, but you come in like half that ownership. On DK, 16 and change percent ownership for the 8,700. It's another spot where I don't know. I don't know that he's got the strongest like strikeout upside. I don't know that he's got the best path toward giving you a really high MLB DFS total so much as he's got a path toward like a clean start, getting you through safe, which I don't know that's what we're looking for 8,700 on DK on this slate. We've got a lot of other guys with maybe better strikeout upside, better potential for DFS scoring purposes on this slate. So he's an interesting, tricky little spot at that price. If he was the 7,900 price tag even on DK, I think I'd like it a little bit more.
Yep, I get that. It's on Yahoo 42. That's a number you can go to. Again, I'm the genius playing 3 sites today because why wouldn't I just do something like that while you're hosting a show trying to go through everything? Let me just tell you, bad decision making, kind of my MO here today. But I digress. We're gonna find some better decisions here as we're going down the board a little bit further here. Now we're getting into the range that I find to be extremely, extremely enticing. So Tariq Skubal, there's no problem going up against this Baltimore team. I guess you're getting Santander now back in that lineup. I just saw that he ended up in there, but I mean, there's a guy that can maybe pop and do something, but again, not somebody you're concerned about. He's a below average dude, I would say. Just enough pop there, switch hitter, coming from the right side now in this matchup. But going down further, Logan Gilbert, of course, going to be crazy on. We've just had that ownership run 30% right now, but only a 14.3% top 2 pitcher percentage. That's kind of a freaky little spot to see on him. And of course, we'll get to my boy Tukey later, but Logan Gilbert, how are you dealing with him?
So yeah, the ownership is my biggest concern there. And like you said, it's going to be about double what we've got him as probability of being a top 2 starter. That's concerning. I actually kind of like him a little bit more on the FanDuel slate for 8,800. It puts him in that awkward price range again, but he's kind of, 9% ownership. You can get away with some shares of that, I think. I think he's in a great spot. This is a really weak Rangers lineup, taking Joey Gallo out of it. We know that this is a good spot for strikeouts overall. The confirmed lineup has an average strikeout rate of 24%. You've got some extreme guys toward the back end of the lineup. You've got some of their best hitters, Adolis Garcia and Nate Lowe, both extreme strikeout guys. The strikeout average is actually really significantly helped by having Kiner Falefa and Brock Holt up top at 15% and 16% respectively. And nobody's scared of those two guys in terms of their hitting ability. So I just think it's a really safe spot. And Gilbert's been really good, 56 2/3, 28.8% strikeout rate, under a 4x FIP, 12.8% induced swinging strikes, 8.2% barrel ball. You'd like to see that come down, 44.9% hard hit rate. You'd certainly like to see that drop, 91 mile an hour average exit velo. So there's some threat that a guy like Adolis Garcia, a guy like Nate Lowe could turn on one of these. It's just a bad lineup with a ton of strikeouts in it, and he's priced really well. So I think he makes sense, but I think for me, if I'm playing it on DK, given the fact that there are other similarly priced guys, this was my go-to guy. This is the guy who projects the best for me. But based on ownership, I would probably look to maybe have the Fields ownership, still have some Logan Gilbert, and then spread some of that out to some of the other guys in that 7,000 price range on DK. Guys like Tariq Skubal, maybe a Vince Velasquez, who I mentioned at the top of the show, maybe like a Ross Stripling, even if you wanted to roll those crazy dice. Probably not. He doesn't project that well. Tony Gonsolin was the guy I was actually trying to think of.
Oh, okay. Yep. You're just making up people. That's cool. Yeah. You're all good. It's all right. Lying is fun. Lying's fun. It's nowhere to go with that. You know what? You're dead on though. Everything in this mid-K range. I mean, Logan Gilbert is a great play. I'm not going to talk anybody off of Logan Gilbert going up against this Texas Rangers team. Looking at the ownership, just a little bit freaky. So I'm hoping that this is the case. Now, the ownership, I'm hoping we are dead on with this one today. Sunday was hard because it's difficult. We underestimate how many times people box score watch. Like it is very hard to account for people who just see somebody who's performed well back-to-back games and they just kind of flood there. On Sunday, my guy was Tukey Toussaint. I thought I was way over the field. I had like 35% of that guy at the absolute basement. He was projected for like 1 or 2%. In the $18, he ended up like 16% or something like that. I get a freaky feeling that he's going to be higher owned than that, or not higher owned than 16%, but I have a feeling that he's much, much higher than what we've got there because people just see two fantastic outings. He's 6,900 and now they want to click on the name. That is literally my only pause because I love some of the changes he's added. Greg was talking beforehand. We did a show earlier today, and obviously on the previous show, he just talked about how that changed his sinker, just incorporating that pitch in, giving himself the opportunity to get ahead of counts and then get the generated swing and misses with some of his breaking pitches. I mean, he's locating only 2 walks now through 2 starts. I bet there's some regression there, but even if he's semi-decent, just below 10%, something like that, the guy's got crazy strikeout stuff. So how do you feel about Toussaint in this spot?
Yeah, I like the spot for him going up against a Brewers lineup that's got plenty of strikeouts in it. It doesn't have some of their best play. It doesn't have Christian Yelich in it. We're looking at a pretty weak version of this lineup. They did get Eduardo Escobar in there, so if you think anything about him, he's got 22 home runs on the season, 232 ISO. He'll be hitting cleanup. He's switch hitter, so maybe that's a little bit of an additional threat here compared to where this Brewers lineup typically is. There's plenty of strikeouts available. Toussaint, 29.4% strikeout rate in the 13 2/3 inning sample. But he's a premium kid, high-end prospect. You mentioned the walk rate has been excellent, but we all expect that'll regress. But what I like is that in the small sample, only 3% barrel ball rate, average 4.8-degree launch angle. So I don't really care that he's yielded 51.5% hard hit and 95.7 mile-an-hour average exit velo. If guys are hitting the ball barely above the ground, not on any kind of significant home run trajectory, I don't really mind that. He comes in very, very clean on the walks plus power rate minus strikeout rate. So I really like the spot. I think he can limit the upside for the highly owned Brewers on the other side of this, which is another part of that equation. It looks like a lot of people are going to that team, which I don't really get. I lump them in kind of with the Tigers and that conversation where when we're over-owning bad teams, it doesn't really make sense to me. So I would be staying away from the Brewers, and I think it makes sense to have some Tukey. I do agree he'll probably get higher on than what we've got him projected for, but even if it goes from, we've got him at 1.8 on DK, so even if it quintuples by the time I stop talking, it'll still be totally playable. So I think it's a good spot.
Yeah, I just don't want him over 10%. That's really what it is. And I'm going to have in the $8, I'm going to have some Brewers just to kind of even out some of that. Some of the risk of playing as much as what I'm planning on playing of Tukey, but I don't know. He goes from throwing a pitch 5% of the time to 60% of the time through 2 starts. I think he might have found something. And if he's locating that, we know the breaking stuff just moves and is impossible to hit. So I like getting to him just because that strikeout rate is hard to replicate underneath 7K. In fact, you can't replicate it. Of course. Oh, we've got Rosso Music. He's had a couple super chats here this week. Thank you so much once again. I cannot say the name of the thing, but I promise you we will address this. He says over under 7.5 on Schmei's Schmicks, if you can figure that out for me.
7.5 what?
Fantasy points. So it's a little bit different scoring over there. Let me actually pull it up here because somebody had said earlier that it's like FanDuel scoring, and it's a little bit different. I just want to double check here as I'm looking at it.
Who's the player in question?
Oh, sorry, Max Muncy. I thought you had the chat up. My apologies. No worries. What a great host I am, helping you out here every second, every turn. Always have your back. No, I don't.
I appreciate it. I project Max Muncy in my projection significantly over 7.5 fantasy points based on FanDuel projections. Got a decent little home run mark on him. I kind of like the spot going up against Gallen. He's a good pitcher, but he puts guys on base. There's enough reasons that you can attack him and just expect some offense out of that Dodgers lineup. So at worst, you've got the expectation that the rising tide can lift him, and he's one of the best hitters in that lineup. So I think he produces on his own. So yeah, I like Max to go over 7.5 fantasy points here.
Me too. This lineup is stupid, and I know Zach Allen's a decent enough pitcher. I don't care what pitcher you are. This lineup is not going to be a whole lot of fun. As Bellinger starts to get healthier, looking at him in the 7 hole is hilarious. It's that's the kind of lineup you're looking at here now. There's no give up at any point in time, except for one Billy McKinney, because God knows what's going on with that. But such is life. We should get back to pitching here. We're moving our way down the board. What else do you see kind of on the bottom end here? Is there a punt guy that might kind of tickle your fancy on this slate?
Oh, you're really trying to walk me into talking actually and be serious about talking about Vince Velasquez here? I don't want to do it.
Here we go. I was going to say, this is your time. This is your dance. Somebody wanted me to sing. There it is.
Look, he's projecting for me in like the middle of the board, right? And it's toward the bottom end of where I would consider playing anybody. I think there is upside given the fact that this Pirates lineup is just flat bad. They're bad at creating runs. They're bad at doing everything other than limiting strikeouts against right-handed pitching. He does have the ability to induce swinging strikes and miss bats. He's at an 11.1% swinging strike rate. He's at a 24.2% strikeout rate on the season. I think we've seen him a little bit higher than that in his past. I don't have it in front of me, but we do have concerns around the 11.1% barrel ball rate, the 41.7% hard hit rate, the 12.7% walk rate. So he's by no means safe. He's an ugly play. But I think for price, he's at least on the board against a really, really weak Pittsburgh lineup where I think he's got enough talent to maybe find a couple additional strikeouts, which we've seen talented pitchers do. So a few shares, total gamble, ownership play that not a lot of people are looking at, and a price play that not a lot of people are looking at. He's somewhat on the board. I don't love it. Scooble, I think, would be the more comfortable call that we haven't really discussed. 7,500 on the DK slate, 8,200 on the FanDuel slate. I'm actually getting to a fair amount of Orioles just based on some of the contact metrics that Scooble gives up. He's sitting at a 13.2% barrel ball rate, a 45.4% hard hit, 91 mile an hour average exit velo. He strikes out 26.3% of hitters, only walks 8.9%. So in my metric that I talk about a lot, he actually comes in a little bit better than Velasquez does. They're both pretty targetable, but they're also both talented guys who can strike out opposing hitters. So they're both kind of a dangerous but potential upside play, which a lot of the time in GPPs is kind of what we're looking for. So 15% ownership on Scooble on DK, 8% on FanDuel. I think he's in play as well going up against an Orioles lineup that, like I said, I was getting to some of this because I do get good power marks on the Orioles. So that's a spot I would probably look to both sides it. I would leave the Tigers and Matt Harvey entirely on the table, and I would take some Orioles bats and some Tariq Scooble shares, not in the same lineup.
That would make sense. Yeah, I like that a lot. I was going to say thank you for that last tidbit. That was good to know. Sure, I have seen, there was earlier this season that a guy ran a 5-man against his pitcher and won a massive GPP on DK. I think he won 100K.
As you do.
It happens. I think, bro, one of our guys, he's been in and out of the Awesemo streets, but what a phenomenal MLB DFS player he is. Yep. But he absolutely went nuts on that on Twitter. It was good times. We have so many people in here right now too. 920 of you here on a Friday, kicking it. Cheers to you all. I have water because I'm a professional today. Last Friday, maybe not so professional, but definitely hit that like button for us. It goes a long way. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. They are all very helpful things that go a long way for us. And if you appreciate what we do, if you appreciate for sure what Terry is doing over there, because he's the man, hit that like button for us. It's the best way that you can support us here, doing the free content in front of you on YouTube every single day, almost around the clock. We're almost a 24/7 news station at this point. We have every sport covered. If there's DFS contests for it, we're putting out content for it. So definitely do that to show us a little bit of thanks on the front end of it there. Also, if you are bored today, and I bet some of you probably are pre-gaming, you're hanging out, having a couple beers here, getting ready to go out, if you're in a place where it can be safe to do so, do show caution. But YouTube channels, we got 2 new ones, and they are so freaking cool. I can't even tell you. The new Awesemo Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. Also, so that's for season-long best ball stuff. Matt Gajewski, Lofty's putting out a bunch of content for it. I've been doing some stuff also. Ben Ross has been doing some stuff for it. Check those out because those videos are great, as well as the Awesemo Odds channel. We had the NBA draft show yesterday. Absolute blast. Rinpack was stopping by, the absolute GOAT. We had Alex Baker stopping in on his way to Lollapalooza. Good times were had by all. In the worst internet that's ever existed ever, but he's the boss man. He does what he wants, as he should. Absolutely live your life, my dude. But check out both of those because those also are going to be churning out content. Football is so close. It is less than a month and a half away here. Preseason will be here before you even know it. Check out all of those on the screen here from Tyler, the best producer in the game that is not, of course, that if there wasn't a Tinkerquist meme at this point, I probably would be a little bit nicer to one Jordan Klein, but Tyler, best producer in the game as of right now, this second. Hit subscribe on those channels. Tyler, also put those into the chat. Put those in the chat. That would be so helpful for us all. All you got to do is just click subscribe on it. And that's how you do the thing. And have you ever seen Manolo, the guy on Instagram who does all the golf videos? And that's it. Have you seen it?
I know who you're talking about. Yeah. Somebody linked me to that. Not
waggle that shit, smack that shit. It's so good. It's one of the best follows. You need to be following Manola on the Instagram and the Twitter spheres. Good stuff. All right.
I have an Instagram. My dog does.
Your dog has an Instagram and you don't?
He does. He's got like 3 followers. Just basically so that we can follow one person's pictures and they can follow ours. It's a very small relationship. I'm not a big Instagram person.
You're doing that with like a half tea lemonade in the mid conversation. You just kind of slip that in. I was going to say, do you have kids?
Around. You assume this is lemonade.
Dude, do you have kids?
No kids? Yeah, no, just the dog and the cat.
All right. I didn't know if you needed to like check up on your kids on the Instagram, which is why you got one with a dog just as a cover or something. But man, that's something you learn every single day about the people you work with. That's great, actually. We need a dog very, very badly. That would improve my quality of life. But also, let's get back to baseball here. I got you covered here, everybody. We won't go on any more tangents, I think. I can't promise that. We're going to probably talk about movies at some point. But Top Stacks tool. I'm hitting a refresh on it right now because it seemed as though everybody dropped underneath 10%. And sure enough, Toronto, 9.6%. Dodgers, 9.2% top stack potential. Looking up here, nobody else above 6.2% here for the Phillies. It is very, very spread out today. On the top end, is there a team that's really looking stronger amongst these top stack guys a little bit more than the other? Toronto, Dodgers, Phillies. Who are you going to the most?
So I'm just waiting as the page reloads here. So yeah, looking at the board across sites, for me on FanDuel, I wish the Blue Jays were getting the ownership and the positive leverage at the top of the board that they're getting on DK. I think if I were playing on DK, I would just be flocking right to those Dodgers and Blue Jays bats. They look really strong right off the top there. We talked a little bit about the Dodgers. The Blue Jays, one of the best lineups in baseball from top to bottom. You can roster them every which way. So they're just interesting teams to put together, and you're getting positive leverage for them on the slate. Then looking over at the FanDuel boards, it's a little bit tighter. You get a little bit of leverage on the Dodgers maybe. It's just everybody seems a lot more appropriately owned on the FanDuel slate. And then so you have to kind of go down the board a little bit, at which point I like getting to the Oakland bats. I like getting to the Yankees bats. Well, I wrote up the Yankees this afternoon. They've got.
Oh, did you though? Did you though?
I did.
Did you though? You wrote up the Yankees. I'm shocked. I tell you.
I gave it a little. Did you really think that the Yankees were going to make these moves and we weren't going to talk about it in this space? Kind of an approach. So, yeah, it was. I think that lineup is probably going a little bit under-owned on the slate here, just given their upside. Although Thompson has done a pretty good job limiting home run power this season so far, I expect it's going to eventually regress. This would be a good spot for it to happen. So I think the Yanks are a little bit interesting going under-owned. But it's to your point, one of those days where we see outside of the Blue Jays at the top, everybody in single digits and everybody from top to bottom very, very close. You can go down to the Mets, like, I don't know, what is that, 15 spots down the board, and they're 2 percentage points behind where the Padres are in like the 5th spot on the board. So it's just a good day, like I said off the top of the show, to just really try and spread out and capture a lot of ranges of outcomes, or make a few decisions and just say, hey, I'm going to focus in on these few specific positively leveraged teams and over-dedicate some lineup shares if you want to play it that way. I prefer the broad range of outcomes approach.
Yeah, so Milwaukee is coming in with the highest ownership on the entire slate. I already talked about how I like Tukey. It's obviously a great hitting environment. I talked about how I'll have a little bit of them. It would kind of be foolish to have a guy with a walk problem, a notorious year-long walk problem, and then not just have a little bit on the other side of it there. So I like the Brewers at their ownership, probably a little bit high. As you said, I like getting to this Yankees team, and I think they're going way overlooked here. 1.6% total ownership, 3.1% top stack percentage, but it doesn't matter if it's Marlins Park. This lineup, as you just look at it, I know that it's not Anthony Rizzo of a couple of years ago still, but he's extremely good compared to any first baseman that they've had there other than, any first baseman they've had there forever, it seems like. I mean, Gallo, Judge, Rizzo, Stanton. Now Stanton being in the lineup there. He's going to play outfield. That should be enjoyable to watch. That'll be a sweat if a ball's hit in his direction. I'm excited for that. But how can you not like going to the Yankees here? I'm right there with you as well. Probably my favorite team to be getting to on the entire slate is the Dodgers. I know that they were talking a little bit on the other show about how Zach Gallen is definitely serviceable. And I think that there's definitely a case to be made for Zach Gallen being a better pitcher and being able to get through this lineup, but still gives up hard contact, nearly 42% on the season, 10-degree launch angle. Has the 27% K percentage, so he can miss bats. But what bats are really going to be missing in this lineup? I mean, Chris Taylor is one of your highest strikeout dudes here. Billy McKinney in the 8 hole. So 1 and 8 hole, but sandwiched in between them 2 through 7. It's just a murderer's row right now. Lots of power from the left side. I don't really feel good about Zach Allen's prowess here. How do you feel about the Dodgers specifically?
Yeah, I think they're up at the top of the board for a very good reason. That's it. It's a killer lineup. I actually don't mind Chris Taylor. I mean, yeah, he's one of the higher strikeout guys in that lineup, 26.4% off the top. That's second highest on the team. But overall, that team, that confirmed lineup, 21.5% average strikeout rate. You've got 4 guys through the middle in Muncy, Turner, Seager, and Will Smith, who are all well under 20% and have significant upside. They come at a relative discount on the FanDuel slate, where most of these hitters are in the mid 3,000s, some of them on the back end of the lineup in the 2,000s. 3,100 for Cody Bellinger is a hilarious misprice. I don't care that he hasn't been good this season on any given slate. His ridiculous power is going to come through. He's going to connect, and you're going to be happy you have him. So I like getting the Cody Bellinger in there. I could even roster a few Billy McKinney shares because he's only 2,100 on the DK slate, 2,200 on FanDuel. So if I need the salary offset, he's got enough power for me. 8 home runs and a 186 ISO in 228 plate appearances this season. He's not a good hitter, but he hits from the left side of the plate, give you a little power upside. So 1 through 8, I can take these Dodgers absolutely. And I like the ownership marks on at least on the DK slate, getting a little higher than I'd like to see around hitters like Seager and Muncy and Bellinger on the FanDuel slate. But in between those guys, there's enough to offset that, though. So I think you can stack them on both sides pretty easily.
All righty. I'm just looking at what is that? What is going on with that? Okay, there it went. I was going through a couple of my exposures here and just double checking some things, and a team that I'm getting way too much of, and I want to get your take as well. Well, actually, let's just take your take for some of these mid-range teams. Is there a team specifically that you're getting to on this slate, that you're making a point to get to on this slate, that you see just going way under-owned on the bottom end?
So I don't know that anybody's going like way under-owned. It looks like we've just got, very, very close to accurate for their upside kind of ownership today. Good job, public. It looks like you guys are, for the most part, doing fairly well getting to the right bats. So I mentioned the A's. I think they're in a very, very good spot here. People have talked a little bit about the Mariners having some potential upside on this slate. They were talking about attacking the Colby Allard ownership, but I think that ownership has since come down. I'm just trying to land on that.
I was going to say one thing I want to interject. Jacob deGrom just got shut down for 2 weeks. In the proactive Greg Ehrenberg way, that news just hit. Go out there and try to get some Corbin Burns money out there right now on NL Cy Young. Right now, Jacob deGrom, massive favorite. If he ends up going to a month, if it starts getting to a month and a half, you start putting some voter doubt into some of those voters' minds. You put some doubt there. Corbin Burns is going to be your NL Cy Young type kind of guy who can kind of come from nowhere here, having a phenomenal year, doing everything extremely well, would win a Cy Young just about any other year in the NL, except for the year where Jacob deGrom is having the year of all years. So go get that money out there too. I wanted to just throw that out there. Let Awesemo Odd Shopper help you find the best book for your play right now, but continue.
So some people were talking about potentially going to the Mariners as a low-owned stack. I don't totally hate it, but I think I would be more inclined to look at the Allard side of that if I was really fishing around for something from that game. I think he's competent enough, 22% strikeout rate on the season, 4.16 xFIP. It's just not a kid that I really want to attack. I believe that he's got enough talent, and you're going to a Seattle team with the second worst strikeout rate in baseball against left-handed pitching at 27.1%. 9% worse than average creating runs, only around the average with a 167 ISO. They do hit home runs in the split. They've got a 4.2% home run rate that is one of the higher marks in the league against lefties. But I just think it's a lot to chase for Mariners stacks, so I don't think I'd be going there. They're kind of on the board. They play out a little bit in terms of where we've got them ranked in the top stacks. They've got a little bit of positive leverage, but for me, it's not the greatest spot. I don't love them against lefties here. So is that a team that you were getting to at all, Seattle?
A little bit. I do like the 6-7. I had a couple 5-2s where I was getting like Toro and Murphy and kind of some of those guys spread amongst it. Haniger, obviously the best hitter in that lineup. I have no problem getting to him here, but I think there's a lot of directions you can go on this slate. 5.4K for Mitch Haniger, not a priority. Much more inclined to stack them or find some two-man combos just to get a little bit different in tournaments. Colby Allard's not good, so I have no problem going that direction as well. There's so many places that we can go. I'm a little overwhelmed going through Fantasy Cruncher and trying to put all of this together. I have made mistakes, absolute mistakes, too many sites, too many things, but I'm excited about it because it's going to make for a fun night of sweating. MLB lineups, I'm pretty stoked. And I think, everybody in the chat here, if you're playing this 15 gamer, you're not having any apprehension. You can go in any direction and know that you're not going to have a crazy negative leverage going towards you, unless, of course, you're playing the Brewers or you're playing the Cubbies. So let's talk the Cubbies because this lineup is terrible. It's very, very bad. They traded the entire farm. I don't know where everybody is. I know Baez is. Oh, actually, I do know where they are. He's with the Mets. I know Rizzo is a Yankee, and I know Bryant is now a Giant. So good times had by all. But this Cubs lineup is getting a ton of ownership compared to what I would expect. It's just kind of a product of the fact that they're super cheap and Paulo Espino is not that good and it's 83 degrees, but I don't want to play them. Are you playing them?
No, I wouldn't go anywhere near that. Yeah, look, you've got a couple guys who have gotten it done on the major league level to a degree in that lineup still, but it's just not a good team. It's just not a good spot. I don't really get why we would want to go there. And those guys that are good aren't really particularly cheap. If you wanted to go to Wilson Contreras on DK, fine. He's 4,900. You're paying a fair price for a good catcher. 236, 346, 440. He's got 17 home runs on the season with a 204 ISO. 15% of the field's going to him. Mm-hmm. I think you can do better. You're talking about Patrick Wisdom, 16% of the field on him. I like Ian Happ, but he's struggled seriously through this entire season. He's at a 181, 296, 332 with a 151 ISO. I honestly wasn't even considering these Cubs, so I'm kind of surprised to see all that ownership. They traded away all their good players. I wouldn't go to them.
It's such a bad lineup. Yeah. It's Patrick Wisdom could be a nice one-off in some spots, but you're getting ownership there. It's not a team that I want to be invested in at this clip right now on this slate. Nearly 1/10 of lineups going to be stacks of this team, or that's just a hard pass. Hard pass for me this evening. Just to kind of round out a team that I really like on this slate. And I want to hear your thoughts on it too, because we're not seeing a lot of ownership going in any direction outside of, Toronto's your top stack here in general. I have no problem going there as well, but the Minnesota Twins, Wade LeBlanc does not miss bats whatsoever. And there's some righty power that exists still in this lineup. Donaldson didn't get moved. Garver's around. Miguel Sano is starting to, I don't know if the words come alive if you get 2 home runs and you move on with your day, but even Brent Rooker's 3.2K. And I don't think it's that homerish. 83 degrees, 60% humidity in Minnesota today. Wind blowing in slightly, but Wade LeBlanc, I do not believe in. I think this might be a little bit too low of a number, even here in St. Louis on the road. Not as good of a ballpark as Target Field, but how do you feel about the Twins as a complete homer stack today?
You know what? I kind of like that call. I'm with you. It's not the greatest version of this lineup anymore, obviously, because those players aren't on the team anymore, but they've got enough talent in here. And going up against Wade LeBlanc over 35 and a third innings, it's a limited sample size, of course, but we know that throughout his career, there hasn't been a significant thing to go up against here. So 14.7% strikeout rate, 9.7% barrel ball. It brings him down to a negative 1.7 in my BBB minus K with the 6.7% walk rate in there. So he's attackable in terms of run creation and sequential hitting. He gives up a significant amount of power upside to this lineup. So they have 4 hitters with above average chances in my home run model here of hitting a home run tonight. Mm-hmm. And I think there's at least a couple guys who, at least in theory, should be functional for like wraparound type plays, contact type hitters. Like Andrelton Simmons is struggling this year, 214, 284, 279 at the bottom of the lineup, but he's been a better hit tool and on-base guy in his career. So if you wanted to throw him in, if you needed a cheap guy to wrap the lineup back around to Polanco, Rooker, Donaldson, Garver up top, I don't think a guy like that is totally out of play for 2,300 on the DK slate. So, there are different ways to put this team together. I don't dislike that.
Terry, have you ever in your entire life had to unclick this many people on a bench on Fantasy Cruncher?
That's what I was doing before I started talking about the Twins. Going back to it right now.
I am on full Paul George tilt mode right now. It is painful, the experience that I'm going through. Full Nelson Cruz recreation of the trade. But you know where it's not so stressful to be building lineups? You don't have to go through this hassle that we have to deal with for DraftKings, for FanDuel, for all your big sites that we're not too worried about. Of course, that's what we're talking about. But if you want to be building a bankroll and sustaining it, you need to check out our sponsor, No House Advantage. They have a different way of playing DFS, where they offer prop contests across MLB, obviously, NBA and NFL when those start back up, and PGA, which is a lot of fun to do on Thursdays over there for cash prizes. It's 100% peer-to-peer, and it helps level the playing field just by playing other people. And you don't have to deal with salaries like you do on traditional DFS sites. They have over 500 player props, making it the largest provider of player props in the industry. And the best part is new users get a $20 instant match deposit bonus when they use promo code Awesemo. And if you live in the states of Pennsylvania, Arkansas, and Massachusetts, this is important because NHA is now available in those 3 states. So make sure you use that promo code Awesemo. That's all caps AWESEMO when you sign up. So that's $20 that gets put in your account instantly. One of my favorite things to be doing if you're playing over on NHA today in the $2,000 Grand Slam, 1K to first for that, is to target some of these hitters that have 1.5 hit props and going less than on those, or 0.5 hitting props and going over on them as well. Carlos Carrasco is the guy that I had targeted, though, from a K perspective. He's got 6.5 strikeouts listed next to him. I don't think it's 2015, but in the event that it is 2015, Carrasco probably has a chance to beat 6.5 strikeouts, but I don't think he's going to see nearly enough innings to get over that number. So I love in the 10 confidence point slot, Carlos Carrasco, less than 6.5 strikeouts. How do you feel about it, Terry?
Yeah, absolutely. I had to temper his innings in my model because it didn't know that he was just coming back from injury, but he only went like 3 innings in his third rehab start the other day. So I don't expect more than 3 or 4 innings out of him. If I give him back to the place my model wanted, which was over 6 innings, he would be at a 7.47%, 7.4, let's call it 7.5 strikeout projection. When I cut him back down to 3, he's at 3.5. If I give him 4 innings, he gets to 4.8. So I love it across the board. I do not think we get enough innings out of him to hit that mark.
I agree with you. We got Anthony Davis just came in from the top rope and just slammed a 50 spot in the super chat. Oh my lordy. Anthony Davis, ayo, my guy. Mad love for the team. Any weather concern in the Atlanta game? So we've got Loco. He's hanging out in the premium Slack. He's also jumping in here to YouTube. He is playing hopscotch between the 2 spots for you guys, keeping track of all the weather. I think we're okay. I will have him be the final judge of such things. It looks like it's still going to be all right for me. I think it might be a late start is what I'm seeing right now. Do you see anything specifically with the Atlanta game? We have to give this $50 worth of attention, Terry. So maybe we just focus on the Atlanta game for the next 25 minutes.
Might be an easy way to do this. We'll just put the radar up and just have people watch that. Just since it was
we buy a radar with the $50.
There you go. Yeah, I just pulled it up on Dark Sky, which is Alex's go-to site for his weather stuff that he kind of pointed us to this year. It looks like they're pretty clean. They've got a little window of rain from 8 to 9, and it's just their light rain coloring. And then everything else is just like mostly cloudy, overcast. Seems like it's going to be like a humid, nasty kind of an environment, but I don't think they get rained out here. So maybe they get an in-game delay, but I wouldn't sweat a rain out or a postponement or anything.
Oh, man. I mean, I have a lot of Tukey Toussaint, so I probably need to temper expectations a little bit. It's not that hard to get over the field, even with 50 lineups, which is kind of what my go-to is for each site when I'm doing a show. Just to kind of get exposure to different builds, different pricings, things like that. It seems a little bit more manageable than doing the full 150. NBA, it's pretty easy to do the full 150 on a show, but there's so many specific things you're trying to get right with MLB that it just makes it a little bit more difficult for me.
Yeah. MLB needs all those little tweaks around the edges to like, all right, I need a few more shares of this, a few more shares of that, where I just kind of let the math take care of it. And if I'm getting 90% of a guy in NBA, like that's because the math dictates that he's that likely a good play, where we just don't have that component in baseball at all. So that's the tricky part. Makes it fun. I also entered 50 lineups today, and I am not feeling confident.
We got another super chat from Rosso Music again. Winker over or under 8 fantasy points, fellas. Jesse Winker's probably a little different spot. I mean, Max Muncy's 7.5 to be lower than Jesse Winker. And I know Cincinnati, I know Carlos Carrasco. We don't know exactly what that's going to be, but it's not the best hitting environment. I suppose Carlos Carrasco won't be out there for very long. They'll mix and match and try to bring lefties in for Winker from the Mets pen. I'm not sure who is there entirely, but how do you feel about Jesse Winker today?
I like it. I've got him as an over on that projection, so I would just trust my model and stick with that if I was doing it. So yeah, I like him. One of the hot hitters in the league throughout the first half of the year. Guy I've been going to all season long, so I won't stop now.
All right. What's our concern? He said, I wouldn't fade arms in that game. Thank you, Loco. All right. We're not going to be fading arms. Back to my 30% Toussaint. There we are again. This is Groundhog Day. This is Sunday all over again. Massive slate where, of course, why wouldn't you want to invest in a dude with like a 15% career walk rate? That seems like a fun journey for me. Oh, boy. Friday could get interesting. Not going to even lie to you, but let's see. We have the Awesemo Hall of Fame, too. We should do that here before we get to home run plays quick, mainly because everybody won money except for me yesterday. And I'm very happy about that because if I'm not going to win money, I want the Awesemo subs to win money. Actually, you know what? I prefer you do anyway because I'm not here without you. I'm not allowed to be able to have my job without you guys. The amazing stuff that you guys are capable of doing with the tools, with the data, making informed decisions, doing the best that you possibly can to build positive EV lineups using these tools and the things that people like Terry McBride, people like Greg and Adam on the previous shows that they're teaching you so that in the long term, you're winning money. And I just love when it happens here. The Awesemo Hall of Fame here. All you have to do is download the avatar, place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5K contestants, and tweet it to @Awesemo Hall of Fame, and you can win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Screenshots just galore here, so definitely be checking that out. It is outrageous. Look at that. I mean, Mr. Hanley, the guy's out of his mind. You are an insane person. I know we have 15 minutes left, but this deserved the respect that, what in the world can you possibly say about this guy? He smashed NBA. Now he's smashing MLB. Not even fair. And Corfield as well. I mean, this is just ridiculous what these guys are doing right now. It's not just our state. We have absolute horses, like just thoroughbreds in Alex Baker, Adam Scherer, Ryan Patnaik, my dude, Rinpak, as he's better known, Terry McBride. You guys are all incredible players, but seeing our subs, even $222 or $225, that's a huge cash. And we love seeing that kind of stuff. I love seeing $29 on a 30% ROI or on 30% entries. Like that is great stuff. It doesn't matter what level you're winning. We just love to see winning. So hop over here to Awesemo Plus. It is a good place to be.
Our guy in Slack Legalized hit one the other day. It wasn't like life-changing money, but he hit like a nice little $500-600, and it was like it made me feel so good because I've been pulling for him. I know he trolls everybody, but he's a good time. I've been pulling for him, and he's one of like our hard luck losers, not loser, but like he happens to lose money a lot of the time. So it was nice to see him do well. So congrats out there, Legalized. I hope you didn't burn it all already.
Bean dude, W. I mean, won the 50-cent mini max by 20 points. That seems like a positive thing. Congratulations, my guy. What a great spot. All right. I wanted to see this Arizona lineup before even talking about Gonsolin. Van Meter, Cabrera, Calhoun, Walker, Kelly, Peralta. I mean, they're just a bad baseball team. I don't know what Arizona and Arizona did make a couple of moves. Colorado Rockies just blow my mind with the ineptitude of that front office, but I digress.
No sense. I do not understand what the hell the Rockies are doing. How do you make no moves on an active day like this? It makes no sense to me what the hell that team's doing.
And they let Arenado, it's so weird. It's such a weird organization. And I know you're in the toughest division in baseball, but then you got to kind of act like it. You got to rebuild and figure out what to do. You can't live in purgatory and be, what were they, 42-56 here? They're like the worst WRC plus team against, I believe, righties on the season. It's just abysmal numbers and not doing anything. But let's get back to baseball here. We got 15 minutes to go. We got a lot to discuss here, just coming down to the wire. Put your questions in. I'll do my best to get over. I'm going back and forth between lineups. This was way more work than what I anticipated to building here today, but such is life. This is the life we lead, and it is not too bad of a life. So I'm not going to complain, but Terry, home run calls. you are the home run master. You have an article that is devoted to the art of the home run. It has different guys with different grades. Every single team you grade out the best home run hitter. Who is standing out at the top of your board today?
So the guy I picked in my article, which is the one I usually give on shows, actually ended up not playing today. That was Rhys Hoskins of the Phillies. So he's not in the lineup. He had a very nice mark. Bryce Harper's up at the top of the board from the same lineup. I don't necessarily want to go with him. Matty Olson's up toward the top of the board there as well. Sal Perez up there. Juan Soto. I'm not even thinking about whether some of these guys are in the lineup. I'm just going kind of reading off names. I'm just going to – he's not even trending toward the top of my board because the opposing pitcher actually does a decent job limiting home runs so far this season. But I'm just going to be a super homer and go with my new Yankee. I'm going to go with Joey Gallo for the home run. What the hell? That'll be my official call for the day. But he's not at the top of my board.
Why not?
Go Homer. It's the guy I've been begging them to get. Might as well pick him.
Yeah. Again, you want to talk about what year is it? It should be 2015, and you could go back in time and sign him and figure things out that way too. But, in all the years the Cubs weren't good, they were good for a couple in the middle of it, obviously, made a bunch of runs. But Rizzo is going to be a great piece for you going forward. No question about it. For me, I don't really know any other way. I'm going to go a little bit off the board here. So Mejia does not miss bats on the left side here from Cleveland. I'm going to go to Gavin Sheets. He's batting fourth here for the Chicago White Sox. Now that White Sox lineup, adding Hernandez into the middle of it here. I mean, Mejia markedly worse against lefties, 3.3K. I think you could do worse than getting over the field on one Gavin Sheets there in the 4-hole today. That'll be my off the board one. I know Butthole Jenkins is always asking for the goods. There you go. Those are my goodies today. Enjoy them as you will. Hopefully they put up more than 7 points for you. Sorry, I'm so bad at this, but I think you're going to be all right. He's going to do work. Let's see. Do we have any questions coming into Premium Slack? No, we got nothing here. So I get to keep kind of going, living my life here. Is there anything you want to talk about here? Because again, this is a massive slate. There's so much to cover. They did such an amazing job covering game by game breakdowns on the deeper dive. Make sure you're checking that leading into our live before lock shows every single time. But we're trying to give an overview, a slate overview, and Terry is the best at it. Terry, what do you really see out of your lineups now that you might not have been expecting?
That they are not crunching fast enough. I'm really concerned about getting them in, but we'll deal with that in a minute. Let's see. As I sort through them over here, let me click over to the stacks. Getting to more Phillies than I expected to get to as a stack in general. They weren't really necessarily on my radar, but I guess it makes sense with what I was just saying about some of the home run marks that I was getting in my model for some of those guys. I was expecting to get to some Padres. It looks like FC-wise, the Cubbies are popping in here based on that pricing that we talked about, but they're going to get filtered out through my process if I ever manage to get them into the filter. The Cardinals popped up quite a bit for me in the home run model. I just resorted the home run model after I gave the picks, and several guys from the Cards popped up because we had that pitching change. They had been originally scheduled to face Jose Berrios. Obviously, he got traded. Now they got Griffin Jackson there, and I get a significant home run upside around the obvious guys from the Cards being Dylan Carlson, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Tyler O'Neill. You could throw Harrison Bader, Tommy Edman, and Paul DeJong on the back end of that. So honestly, 1 through 8, I would get to some Cards here, and they're not getting that much attention. I don't dislike that spot.
But Ho Jenkins, I know we're all good, my dude. You're just fine. I was just joking around, but I love. That's a good call as well. Good God, you talk about not getting lineups in. This is gonna be a fun one. I'm going to tell you right now. You might want to stay tuned because an Eric blow up might be in the near future here. We might get Paul Georgie here. We might have to get Paul Georgie on the world. Actually, no, we're not going to ever get to that again. But oh my, this is not going very well for me right now.
Hey, was Sonny Gray on your radar at all? And I can just start talking if you. All right, so he was a little bit on my radar.
I lost a bucket of money to Sonny at the hands of Sonny Gray the other day, and I'm a woman scorned. I can't take it again. I can't do it. I'm not okay with myself. And so
I'm a Yankee fan. All right. He had some of the worst years of his career when he was on my team. So I'm with you on not liking Sonny Gray, but for me, he was coming up a little bit. He's on my board DFS wise. I don't love the idea of throwing him into this Mets lineup, but I do think he's got enough talent and enough upside here. He had a bad 2 outings in a row, but he had been fairly consistent before that. On the season, 28.8% strikeout rate, 3.41 xFIP, solid 11.1% swinging strike rate, solid 31.1% CSW. Got too many walks, 9.1% walk rate. So the whip is inflated, 1.41. Too many guys on base, but he's been all right with the contact metrics. 5.9% barrel ball rate, 31.4% hard hit is very, very good. So he limits the damage that opposing teams do most of the time. He had a really short start the last outing. He got lit up, but I think there's enough upside here. The Mets, not a significant strikeout team, but there are some guys in this confirmed lineup that do strike out in the mid-20s. So I think you can find a few strikeouts. I think he's at least usable at 8,100, under 10% ownership on FanDuel, 9,200, under 10% ownership on DK. I think he's kind of interesting over there as an off-the-board kind of a pitching play that people just aren't really seeming to pay attention to.
I want to see everybody's home run calls in the chat. If you don't put it in writing, it didn't happen. You got to put it in writing. You put your name next to the name. I'll go back and watch this. I'll know whether or not you're lying to me or not. Oh, I called this guy. I called that guy. Give me your home run calls in the chat. That's a fun way to kind of start wrapping this up with 8 minutes here. Also allows me to just get out some frustration here as I'm just, oh, hey, it happened. It happened. I'm done. Oh, man.
Oh, nice.
Why do I have so much Andrew Stevenson is the question. Goodbye. Please leave my lineups. Yeah, that's got to go. That's got to change quick. Then we'll be all right. Then we'll be all right here. Oh,
I'm in the process of adjusting by like 300 entries the amount that my sporting tool has to review to even get to lineups here.
This is crazy. Jazz Chisholm was a guy that I was almost about to pull the trigger on against Jameson Taillon. He's a great hitter, and this Marlins Park is obviously what it's called something stupid now. Something life insurance, something or another Marlins Park. It's got a dumb name here now, but I'm telling you, Jazz Chisholm was somebody that I had targeted as a possible really off the board guy to get some leverage here against one Jameson Taillon. Just kind of was contemplating that. Thought I would throw that out there as everybody's doing that. Also, I don't know why I just got so many Brewers, but this has got to change as well. Oh boy, we are going to be sweating it here down to the wire, everybody. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. I think we'll get it here. All right. I just hard capped them at 10%. There's some cheats that we're going to have on this, and we'll be all right. There we go. Now we will be all set. Jose Ramirez at low ownership. Joey Votto just keeps hitting home runs. Totally understandable going to him as well. Just ridiculous. Rex Grossman, Brent Rooker. Oh, Michael Knack. I'm assuming Knack. Just listed off 4 dudes. That's a good way to cover your bases. Like, just list off 4 dudes you think are going to hit a home run. You're probably going to be right more times than you're not.
I'd be up to like 500 if I could do that every day in my column. That's great. I got to do my totals. I hope I'm still over 20%. I was earlier in the season. Oh,
dude, you're a stud here. Top 2 stacks. That's a great question. Who are the top 2 stacks that you have rostered on this slate today, Terry?
For me, it's probably... Why is this not filtering? It's probably going to be the chalky Blue Jays and the chalky Dodgers and some hopefully under-owned Yankees as a 3-way combination, and we'll just see what we can get through at this point.
Oh man, Gavin Sheets. I keep thinking of like Sheets puns. I can't think of any. Like it's like I keep having my brain go to that song, yeah, from back in the day, where it's like. Lady in the street, but a freak in the bed, where it's like something, there's sheets in that song somewhere. Maybe I'm just making that up in my own head. I'm an artist in my own brain. Not true. All right. We're going to get these in. We got 5 minutes left to lock. If you're not getting your lineups in right now, this second, you're probably in a lot of trouble. Like, I don't know, me, that might be who you are. So definitely get those things in. What was that?
I thought you were going to say me when you said that.
Are you close? Are you close?
I'm getting there. I finally have my filtering tool in a spot where it can actually work now based on the amount of lineups I'm putting in here. So we'll see what we actually...
I am only playing 3 max next time there's a, 15 game slate to cover.
Probably
it's just, idea. This is probably the worst that I have ever treated myself on a show ever. This is the most stressful experience ever. But everybody get those on in. Yeah, see, Lil Jon, yeah. I said if we hit those likes, get those likes up a little bit, I will rap on the way out. I have a rap song. I know. I'm with it. I'm hip. Had to get back to the Austin Powers too. For those who tuned in with Terry McBride and I earlier in the week, had to throw that in here as well. Top pitchers as well. What are your pitcher exposures looking like over on the blue site? I'll give you guys mine over on the DK site as well.
Bear with me just one sec. Let me unclick this and get to the pictures here, and I'll read them off real quick before I actually put them into the entry. Looks like I will have a good amount of Sonny Gray. I will have some Corbin Burns. I will have some Lance Lynn as expected. Maybe a couple shares of Kevin Gausman and Framber Valdez trickling around the edges. Probably going to be under where I wanted to be on Bassett, and I'll have some Logan Gilbert in there.
Oh, Logan Gilbert. I didn't know how much Logan Gilbert was too much Logan Gilbert until I saw my exposures. 55% of that guy, my highest owned pitcher here on the day. Then it becomes Corbin Burns, Jamison Taillon and Tukey, both at 25% for me. Tariq Skubal as well. Lance Lynn, 10%. I would probably be adding more of him if I weren't on a show right now, but there's that. And I think that I'm okay with that. I think I'll be just siding more with the Gilbert Burns side of it, and I'm just fine with that. The Dodgers still my highest owned stack. I don't mind. You got to find some unique ways with the Tigers to kind of make that work, but you want the main dudes, the Grossman and Akil Baddoo, Jonathan Scope for sure against Baltimore here. That bullpen is basically free money, so I like going there as well. Terry, 3 minutes to go here. Get your lineups in. Everybody else get your lineups in here as well. This was a crazy day between all. Cantor just said, thank you for Berrios. You're welcome. Yeah, I had a lot to do with that. I was calling the front office. I don't mind that we lost Berrios. I'm still just sad about Nelson Cruz. And if we had moved Buxton, I would not be okay right now.
I just assumed if they traded Buxton, you wouldn't be on this show, and I would just be monologuing through this whole thing. That was my thought through the day. But as a Yankee fan, Berrios, this was another destination rumored for Berrios, and I didn't really want him. I don't love him as a pitcher. I would have taken him because I did think they needed to upgrade the rotation, but I kind of like the Heaney acquisition a little bit better. Strikeout-oriented lefty in Yankee Stadium. Kind of like that a little bit better.
Yeah, it's...
Oh, lineups are in.
Lineups are in. You're good?
Yeah.
Oh, baby. Let's go.
Hey, have you seen odds, or maybe, I don't even know if there are odds available on Vlad Guerrero winning a Triple Crown? I don't think it's too early to start talking about this. Not just live, but like extremely live for such things. The guy's outrageous. And yeah, I would want to be invested in such things. I mean, he's the best hitter in baseball. I mean, I love Shohei Ohtani with everything that I am, but I cannot tell you how good, especially considering the first year that he had coming into the bigs and everybody was down on him again there. I mean, he's just making people look foolish now that had any questions about him being one of the best hitters, because my God, is he so good. Yeah, 328, 425, 661 on the season with a 333 ISO, 33 home runs. Dude strikes out only 17% of the time, walks 13.7% of the time, 55.4% hard hit rate, 15.9% barrel ball rate. Guy's unreal. So he's right there on all the Triple Crown categories. I really like that. I have no idea what the odds are, but I think he's got a really realistic and good shot at it. He's a better hitter than Ohtani is from a hit tool perspective.
I got my lineups in, and I don't know about that, but I think that is means for celebration here. Terry looks like he did as well. He's having a nice swig. He's ready. He's in weekend mode now. Terry, my dude, we are done for the day here. We are at lock, and if we're not, there we go. 4:05 out here on the West Coast, 7:05 on the East Coast. Terry, any final words for the people as we get out of here?
I'm jealous of you being out there in the past 3 hours behind where we were. I won't spoil anything that happened in the interim, but I wish I could go enjoy the rest of my afternoon instead of having it be nighttime.
I'm just telling you, you should go bet on the Dodgers. How about that? World Series champions, back-to-back Los Angeles Dodgers incoming here. But everybody else, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We had so many of you guys stopping by here. It was a blast. We don't have any more shows going today, but tomorrow we're picking everything back up. We're ready to rock here, just like we normally are, starting with the MLB Strategy Show in the morning with Greg and with Adam. You won't want to miss that, so tune in for that. And then MMA Live Before Lock, Jason Floyd, Pete Rogers, Pete the Heat, the best duo that you can possibly find for MMA. Check them out as well. I'm Eric Lindquist. He's Terry McBride. Have a great weekend, everybody.